accordance with Section 5 of the Open Public Meetings Act, Chapter 231, Public Law 1975, be advised that notice of this meeting was made by posting on the Bulletin Board in Town Hall, mailing to the officially designated newspapers a list of the meeting dates annually, indicating that this meeting would take place on Monday, June 21st, 2021, at 7 p.m. via Zoom webinar. Craig Klettner.
Here.
Jody Sharma.
Here.
Joy Siegel.
Here.
Wolfgang Tutoris.
Here.
Amy Lawrence.
Here.
Shanju Harjani.
Here, sorry.
Vice Chairman Jessica Glad.
Here.
Chairman Joseph Steinberg.
Here. All right, the first thing we'll do then is approve the two sets of minutes. The first is April the 19th. That's correct, Eileen?
Yes, I'm sorry, yes,
And they've been circulated.
correct.
Any additions or corrections?
I
The
have not
minute-
received any as of today.
Pardon me?
I did not receive any.
I'm asking if there are any tonight. If not, will someone make a motion that the minutes of April the 19th be approved?
So moved.
Second. Second.
All in favor, show of hands.
Aye.
I see everybody's hand up. Right, the second set is May
Third,
3rd. Those were circulated too, correct?
yes.
Any additions or corrections to the minutes of May the 3rd? If not, is there a motion to approve those minutes?
Move approval of minutes from May 3rd.
Second,
Second.
all in favor, show of hands. It looks unanimous to me. Right, there are two memorializations tonight. And Joy, once again, I want to thank you publicly for the hard work you put in going through these minutes and these memorializations and working with Rob to make them absolutely perfect. Thank you. Okay, and, has everybody read the memorializing resolution relating to 90 Farley Road, which is calendar 3794-21? Are there any additions or corrections to that memorialization? If not, is there a motion that 90 Farley Road, is everyone here permitted to vote on this, Eileen?
Jessica and Shanju are not eligible to vote.
Jessica and Sandra. Okay, and obviously Amy. Was Amy there
Yes, is eligible.
for this hearing? Okay, is there a motion on 90 Farley Road LLC to approve the memorializing resolution?
Moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Craig Klettner,
Yes.
Jody Sharma,
Yes.
Joy Siegel,
Yes.
Wolfgang Tutoris,
Yes.
Amy Lawrence,
Yes.
Joseph Steinberg.
Yes. Now we have a memorializing resolution in calendar 3796-21, which was Beth and Dean Kaufman at 367 Wyoming Avenue in Millburn. Are there any additions or corrections to the memorializing resolution that was circulated in that case? If not, is there a motion to approve the memorializing resolution in calendar 3796-21?
Eileen, is everyone available to vote? Eligible?
The only ineligible voters are Jessica, Joe, and Steve. Everyone else is eligible.
I move approval of the memorializing resolution for calendar number 3796-21.
Is there a second?
Second.
Was that Amy? I didn't,
Yes.
Amy?
okay. Craig Plattner,
Yes.
Jody Sharma,
Yes.
Joey Siegel,
Yes.
Wolfgang Tutoris,
Yes.
Amy Lawrence,
Yes.
Sanju Harjani.
Yes.
I sat on that case too, Eileen, and I vote yes.
Well, you didn't vote on the application because you lost your audio.
I what?
You didn't vote on the matter because you did not have audio. You lost your audio for a portion.
Oh,
You didn't
I
vote.
don't remember that. But okay. Now, the applications for tonight, the very first one, the attorney has asked that that matter be carried. And she asked that it be carried to 2 dates. We've never done that, and I'm not going to do it tonight. We're going to carry the matter, and this is application 3776-20, 340 Millburn Avenue, no singular wireless, will be carried to the meeting of August 2, 2021. And we'll determine that night whether it'll be carried further. But we're not announcing at this point anything more than the matter will be carried to August, the meeting of August 2. All right, the next matter is Corey and Jason Wilf, and on that matter, Jessica is recused. Is that correct, Jessica?
That's correct.
Okay, is the applicant, well, first of all, before we get there, I want to raise an issue that Rob, Simon, and I talked about earlier today. One of the properties that I visited was the property at, and I visited all the properties, but the one at 12 Ridge Terrace in Short Hills, which is listed tonight as the second to last application. I went to look at the property, and it was perfectly obvious to me when I walked up to it, and it was confirmed by the homeowner that the shed, which is the subject matter of that application, was there and had been there for quite a while. I did have a very brief conversation with the homeowner, and I asked her just one question. I asked her whether, in fact, that shed was the one that was the subject matter of tonight's hearing, or whether there was an application on for another shed. And she confirmed that it's that shed that was the subject matter of tonight's hearing. I'm going to ask all of you to look at your papers, the papers you got from Eileen for tonight's hearing, and look at the next to last matter on the agenda. And I'm going to ask you to look at attachment E. E is in Ethel.
Which application is this, Joe? The zoo
Yes.
application?
This is
Yes,
the
it's
Zhao
the-
application,
Okay.
12 Ridge Terrace.
Got it. Okay.
12 Ridge Terrace. It's the next to last one. Vikang Zhu, I believe, is the way you pronounce the name. I'm going to ask you, it's the next to last one in the pile tonight. I'm going to ask you to look at the, as I said before, at attachment E is in Ethel. Now, we looked at this together, Rob and I earlier today. And if you looked under existing usage, which is the second column, it was left blank. There's nothing there. Proposed usage, someone has written in 12 feet. The next column is maximum allowed or minimum permitted. It should say minimum required by the ordinance, and it's 12 feet. But look at the last column. It says extent of the variance. And to my eye, it says 0.8 feet. And as soon as I saw that, I said to myself, well, the first question that I would ask the applicant is why don't they move the shed back 9 inches, which is 8.8 feet, away from the property line, then they don't need a variance. But when I got there and looked and saw what was going on, that shed is right up against the property line, or appears to be. And so this attachment E was totally messed up and is totally wrong. And I called Rob and asked him if he thought that we should adjourn this matter tonight so that a new application can be filed, on the theory that if anyone got the notice in the mail and came down to Eileen's office to look at the file, they would be, as I was, totally confused, thinking that it was an application for a 0.8 foot variance. Rob said to me, and Rob, you can speak for yourself if you disagree with what I'm going to say, but Rob said, it depends on whether the notice was absolutely clear, because then if somebody went down to Eileen's office and Eileen and this person or neighbor looked at the papers together, they would see right away that that attachment E was totally messed up and was wrong, but they would understand because Eileen would set them straight that in fact this application was for a 12-foot variance, not 0.8 of 1 foot. Well, the problem was that, and the notice that appears in this file that we have is in correct form. But Rob was concerned because he said, and quite properly so, that this is not the notice that necessarily is in the paper. We've got to take a look at the actual notice itself to see what was in the newspaper. Unfortunately, Eileen was not in today.
I look at them before the meeting. I
Pardon
look
me?
at them when they hand them in.
And did
And it
that
was
take
correct. It just says the section number and the requirement,
12, it says 12 feet.
what's required, correct?
And does it say, Eileen, what was proposed?
I don't recall. I usually tell them not to put what they're proposing in case it's a little bit off. That's usually the form we go with. I tell them not to put what they're requiring in case their numbers are incorrect. The survey would show exactly what's being done. So I don't know offhand. I don't have any of the files with me. I've not been in the office.
Also, can I, also on attachment F,
Right.
and under proposed, it says 0, not 0.8.
Yes, I noticed that as well. That's on the very next page, right?
I went with 0 because I can't measure 0.8 on, with a scale. So to me, it was on the property line. It was 0.
Well,
Yeah.
the problem is that the application is for a 12-foot variance. And by the way, you'll all get a big kick out of this. The neighbor blurted out to me, I didn't ask her, that She brought this application because a neighbor, and she pointed in the back of her property, is a member of the zoning board in Millburn and told her that she had to apply for a variance. Now that neighbor is on vacation and is not here tonight, but he was listed on the list of people who got the notices within 200 feet. And as a matter of fact, his property pretty much backs up onto this property. He's on the very, very next block. And he apparently told her that she needed to seek a variance. But I'm going to throw this hot potato back at you, Rob. You're the attorney, and it's a very tough question. Should we hear this case or should we not?
So obviously, notice is jurisdictional and we want to make sure the notice is right. Without actually seeing the published notice, it's difficult, at least as to the notice, to conclude one way or another as to whether the notice was sufficient for purposes of conferring jurisdiction on this board for purposes of the hearing. Let's assume for the moment that the notice was correct. The fact that the notice is supposed to permit or allow a member of the public who receives the notice, who may be interested in the application, the opportunity to do more, which would include not just participating in this hearing, but also participating by way of contacting Eileen, looking at the application materials and the like. The problem is that the application materials are confusing, certainly to say the least, a bit incomplete. And I think that the differing factor for me here is that this structure that is the subject of this application has already been placed at the proposed location. So that this is not as if an applicant is coming in and they want to build something or put something up, and there's some time frame involved involving a builder or getting some construction materials or other factors. Here, it's already there. And according to the chairman, somebody brought to this homeowner's attention the need to go and seek variance relief based on the location of this accessory structure. And that's what this person, they should be commended for doing that, certainly. But that being said, we always want to make sure that the application is not only complete for purposes of notice, but jurisdictionally complete in terms of having a full and complete application and being clear. And so where I come out in terms of my advice to the board certainly is that given all the factors, whether it's the 0.8 versus 0, whether it's already there versus a couple of times in the application materials, I saw it said proposed as if it's not there yet. I think that, we always come out on the side of caution for these kind of questions. And so in terms of grabbing the hot potato, Mr. Chairman, I would recommend that we carry the meeting, certainly to a new date, and ask that the applicant certainly provide an updated application packet, which with very clear language and standards in terms of what is actually being applied for. I do think, though, that in terms of the notice itself, that depending on the date, and my guess is it's not as if we're going to be carrying this for 2 weeks, that it would provide enough opportunity for us to take a look at the notice. And if we feel that to err on the side of caution and have the applicant renotice, we would do that. If on the other hand, we felt that the notice itself was sufficient, then my advice would be that it wouldn't necessarily be required to renotice, but certainly to make sure that the accurate application materials are submitted to the board at least 10 days prior to the newly scheduled hearing.
Thank you very much. And by the way, I do agree with where you come out on this. I think, however, as a board, we should put this to a vote so the question, I'm going to open it up to the board members. If anyone has anything they want to add to what I've said and to what Rob has said. Obviously, we're happy to entertain any other thoughts that people might have. What Rob is really suggesting is that, if I understand him correctly, is that Eileen would promptly get to him a copy of the notice itself as it appeared in the newspaper. And if the notice is correct, then the applicant would be invited to submit an application that was accurate and was free of all these errors. And I haven't actually talked about every single error that's in the application form itself. So does anyone on the board, the thought that Rob had is that I would announce tonight that this matter is being carried to the meeting of July, what is that meeting, the 16th?
19th,
Is that correct, Eileen?
July 19th.
19th. That we would carry this to July 19th. And Rob would have an opportunity to determine hopefully in the next day or two, whether the notice is correct, in which event the board would take jurisdiction of the case tonight, but we would carry it to give the applicant an opportunity to clean up what is a very, very misleading set of papers as far as the application itself is concerned. Anyone else have anything to say?
I would defer
If
to
not,
Rob
is there-
on this
I'm
one.
sorry.
I said I would defer to Rob on this one.
I would too, and I would agree with him. So is there a motion to carry this matter on the to the 19th of July, which is our next meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
I think we better have a roll call on this, Eileen. So this is a motion to carry this case.
Craig Plattner,
Yes.
Jody Sharma,
Yes.
Joy Siegel,
Yes.
Wolfgang Titoris,
Yes.
Amy Lawrence,
Yes.
Jessica Glad,
Yes.
Joseph Steinberg.
Yes, and if the applicant is here tonight, as I assume she is or he is, I don't know whether it's a man or a woman, I would suggest that they could leave the meeting at this point to and speak to Eileen Davitt to determine what decision Rob Simon has made after he reads the actual notice that appeared in the newspaper.
So Joe, let me just interrupt for a second. So we're clear, and so that the public is clear. The application regarding property commonly known as 12 Ridge Terrace in Short Hills is officially being carried at this moment to the July 19th, 2021 meeting of this board, which will be a virtual meeting with the information available on the township website. No further notice will be required. However, if it's determined that the notice is insufficient, there will be additional notice, but the public is not to rely on that. So for purposes of this evening, the public is to assume that the matter is being carried to July 19th with no further notice to be provided by the applicant, subject to, as you heard, the applicant amending the application to clear up some discrepancies and some other language, so that that amended application will be filed at least 10 days prior to the July 19th, 2021 hearing date in any event.
Thank you very much.
I have
Yeah,
a
that-
hand raised from Christine Kong. I don't know if she is the applicant or do you want to entertain questions from her?
I'm sorry, say that again, Eileen.
I have Christine Kong has her hand raised. I don't know if she is the applicant or
Yeah, she is,
she is the applicant.
yes.
Okay. Do you want
So
do
she's
you want to bring
raising-
her over?
Yes, you bring her over and let's see what she has to say. Yes. Ms. Khan,
Oh,
you're muted.
yeah. Can you hear us now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hi. I want to explain a bit why we actually put the 0 instead of 0.8 feet. The reason is this fence that the shed is again along, it belonged to my neighbor. So the fence is not my fence. So if we measure the property, it has to measure from inside the fence to my shed, right? So to that extent, instead of putting aggressive number, I put a very conservative number, which is 0 feet, right? So to put as close to the property line as possible. And that's the reason why I put the 0, right? Because putting 0 is very conservative, right? Instead of putting 0.8. I know there's a gap in between my shed and the fence, but the reason here is the fence belongs to my neighbor. So the property line is within my side of fence.
Okay, so just even hearing that, and of course, nothing we heard is sworn testimony yet, because we're not starting the application tonight. I think that type of information, sir, it would be helpful to be included in the application materials, so that if the public looks at the application and reviews it, they can see that explanation and anything else that may be relevant to the board's decision on the application. That would be incredibly helpful.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to proceed now to the next matter on the agenda, which was carried from June the 7th. It's the Corey and Jason Wilf matter, where there are three different variances being sought. Are the Wilfs here or anybody
Yes.
representing them? Mr. Keller?
Hi, Mr.
Sorry,
Steinberg.
Eileen, do you
Yeah.
want to just move me to the audience?
Yes. Yes.
You understand, Mr. Keller, that you were sworn under oath at the last hearing? And John James, the same is true for you. You were sworn and you remain under oath. You both understand that?
Yes, sir. And we have an attorney with us this evening, Gary Fortner, who's just joining in right now.
Good evening, everyone. As soon as you're ready, I'll get started.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So for the record, Gary Forstner on behalf of Jason and Corey. What we're trying to do here is address and see if we can focus on those areas that we perceive that there was some concern on the part of the board with regard to the application. Before I get there, can we just get an understanding of who is eligible to vote tonight?
Sure. Eligible to vote tonight on this matter are Craig Putner, Jody Sharma, Joyce Siegel, Wolfgang Tutoris, Joseph Steinberg, Amy Lawrence. I'm sorry, Joseph Steinberg, Chandru Harjani. Amy Lawrence was not here on June 7th. She's not eligible.
So how many people is that? 6?
Can we just confirm, Eileen, that Amy,
Yeah,
I'm sorry, Eileen, go ahead.
I don't know if you were able to watch the June 7th.
I did not. I didn't realize that. So I think,
So we have 6.
So there are 6, all right, but there are no D variances. So a simple majority will prevail.
Thank you. So what this application is about is trying to retrofit an existing property that was built on spec 20 years ago for a growing family. What we have, and we can go through it in greater detail, but you may recall from the last hearing, is that the house as it was constructed was built in a fairly inefficient manner and had several of the rooms, for instance, that just didn't work any longer. For instance, a dining room table to fit their entire family did not function well in the dining room there, so they were looking for a bump out. If this applicant were willing and able to tear down the existing building and build it from scratch, they can be fully conforming for the application. Needless to say, that would be a very inefficient use of resources, and we aren't proposing to knock down the existing building. I tell you that for context because it is the layout that they inherited that necessitates the application that's before you this evening. There were two items in particular which the board seemed to be concerned about. One was with regard to some three, to be precise, 3 clumps of river birch trees in the rear of the property that would need to be removed. And you may recall that the board requested that the town's arborist and forester be given the opportunity to weigh in on it. And we've submitted a copy of an email from Tom Doty in that role, and I'm going to read it to you so we're all clear in terms of what it says. It says, "Good afternoon. Based on the detailed plan, the 3-river birch tree will be exempt from Millburn Township tree removal permit. In other words, it can be removed as of right." That was my edification. "I agree with your assessment that these trees are prone to snow load damage, weather events, and not a specimen or historic tree. These trees can be easily replaced with more river birch, which in fact this applicant is proposing to do." And then he goes on to say, "I see no reason for not being able to proceed with the plans." We'll have a little bit of additional testimony here this evening, but what you will hear is that the river birch there are beyond their lifespan, as opposed to oaks and maples and some other specimen type trees that can last a very long time. The river birch have a limited lifespan. And these trees have not only essentially reached that lifespan, they've had to be secured already because of storm damage, given the age and condition of those trees. They're likely to come down in the not too distant future, regardless of whether removed by this applicant or not. So I would submit that first of all, whether or not it be within the jurisdiction of this board is a legal question, but in any event, I would submit that replacing those river birch with something new makes a lot more sense in terms of the preservation of landscaping, given the fact that they have, as was pointed out, that they're beyond their typical lifespan. We also have requested a coverage variance. You may recall that the improvements that have been proposed are all single-story improvements intended to fit the building that's there now. Again, if they were to build this from scratch, they would build 2-story, which would reduce the coverage. So here's what's the interesting anomaly that results from the fact that they're trying to do an expansion of the building that's there. The amount of FAR is below the requirements more than the coverage is above the requirements. And that, again, is because of the inefficiencies in the layout of the property. So we submit that it's appropriate under the circumstances to allow the coverage variance to proceed accordingly. I think the board was also concerned about the garage, most notably, not necessarily exclusively, but most notably with regard to the front yard. And there's a couple of observations that I think are important with regard to the front yard variance for the garage. First of all, as Rich Keller will testify, it's actually a lot closer to what your ordinance would allow than perhaps we initially conservatively estimated. Irrespective, what it allows us to do is to have essentially 3 fully functional garages. One of the garages, you may recall, essentially because of that layout, that inefficient layout, is not functional. So what we're looking to effectively have is 3 functioning garages. Your ordinance actually allows them to have up to 4 garages. They're not asking for 4. They're asking for 3 functional garages and essentially what amounts to some storage space. In addition, there's a side yard variance, which technically is required with regard to this application, but I would submit that it's merely a technicality, because if you look at the area where the garage is being located, it does conform with the 2 side yards. So the individual side yards are conforming, and at least as far as the frontage, the area where that garage is going to be built, it would conform to the 2 side yard, the double side yard requirement. The reason that a variance is necessary is because towards the rear of the house, on the opposite side entirely, so nowhere near where we're impacting, the lot narrows. And because it narrows, it creates a technicality where a small portion of the building on the other side, again, not affected by the addition that's being proposed, has a smaller setback that would otherwise be required. So I would submit that the setback that's being proposed here, while technically a variance under your ordinance, does not meet the spirit and intent of that concern that the ordinance raises, but rather is, I would submit, is if meets the intent and spirit of your ordinance with regard to the front yard setback. I think just as importantly, if not more importantly, this property is incredibly well landscaped. Indeed, privacy was not only a huge concern for Corey and Jason, but also protecting the privacy of their neighbors. We don't believe that these improvements that we're proposing will in any way be seen from the neighbors because of the extensive landscaping that is being proposed. It should be noted that no neighbors have objected to this application. While that is not necessarily dispositive, it certainly goes to whether or not there's any substantial detriment. That's the background of this application. It is a brief, or hopefully brief, summary of where we're going with this. I do have 2 witnesses who you've heard from a little bit, but I want to introduce a little bit more. One, Brian Hirsch, our landscape architect, to talk a little bit more about those trees and particularly how they've reached their typical lifespan. And I'm going to ask Rich Keller to drill down a little bit more on the specifics as to those variances. Again, focusing most notably on the ones that appear to be of concern to the board. So unless you have any questions or comments, we'll proceed with our witnesses.
Mr. Chairman, can I just say a couple things?
Sure.
So as the applicant knows, obviously, both Mr. Hirsch, Mr. James, Mr. Keller gave comprehensive testimony at the last hearing, and certainly, Mr. Forstner, we don't need a repeat of what they've already testified to. They did a good comprehensive job in terms of explaining the application to date. Number 2 question, are you intending to introduce that email as an exhibit, Mr. Forstner? Okay, that's fine. So that was question number 2. And then point number 3, just to assist the board before we get into the testimony. With regard to what Mr. Forstner was I think he was alluding to, with regard to the ability of the township forester to opine conclusively as to tree removal and the like. I just want to remind the board that certainly under the Millburn Code, if somebody wants to remove a tree, they make an application for the cutting or removal of a tree located on their property, especially in the case where they're looking, as in this case, for a building or a construction permit. At that point, that type of request, typically, if it's involved an application before the Board of Adjustment or the Planning Board, the applicant is to let, in essence, the township forester know about the pendency of that application, and the township forester has the option at that point under the ordinance to withhold his or her determination as to the request to remove a tree pending the outcome of the board, in this case, the Board of Adjustment matter. The fact that Mr. Doty has apparently, and we'll hear it from the applicant and his witnesses, or their witnesses, opined as to the removal of some of the trees we were discussing at the last meeting, certainly is indicative of that official's determination that he or she did not need to withhold his or her endorsement of the request for tree removal pending the outcome of this hearing. So I just want to remind the board of that particular ordinance provision, and that typically it's left to the forester to determine whether they're going to make a determination on a particular issue, or whether they're going to withhold providing an opinion as to a particular tree removal issue pending the outcome of a particular development application. That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I think just to address one of the comments you made, Mr. Simon, our intent this evening is to focus on those items that we think are open questions, and to address those with some of the items that I've talked about here this evening. But we're going to be as efficient as we can with the testimony and the board's time in that regard.
Thank you.
Thank you. Unless there are other questions or comments, I'm going to introduce our first witness, Brian Hirsch.
No problem.
And Rob, I trust you agree that Brian was previously sworn in and is accepted as a landscape architect, so we'll just continue on with his testimony?
Yes, all the witnesses that Mr. Forstner identified as intending to be providing testimony this evening have been previously sworn, and their testimony should be regarded accordingly.
And one last housekeeping matter, we would ask that all the documents submitted in support of the application, including Mr. Doty's email, be considered to be part of the record.
Okay, well, wait, before we, so that was sort of my question. If you're going to have, if it's Mr. Hirsch introduce the particular exhibit, let's do it that way through the
Sure.
witness. We'll mark it, do it the right way.
Understood.
Yeah.
So Mr. Hirsch, again, was previously sworn in and qualified as a landscape architect. Brian, you've had a chance to review the issue that was raised by the board, specifically with regard to the Three River Birches, as well with Mr. Doty, the town's forester. Can you please explain to us your conclusions with regard to that, in particular, the document you received from Mr. Doty?
Sure. So after our meeting on June 7th, when it was carried and there was concern about the river birch, I went down to speak with Tom Doty, and he and I spoke about river birch in general and about these river birch specifically. And just to provide some sort of list of what we discussed, one, that the Three River Birch that are proposed to be removed are located within the proposed pool house and are exempt from any of the requirements for a tree removal permit. The other part was that these trees have been planted by the previous owner and have grown over the last 25 years. As river birch mature, they become structurally compromised because of their genetically weak crotches, which makes them prone to splitting and falling apart during times of heavy snow load or ice storms. The arborist who works at that property, both for this homeowner and the previous owner, has already installed support cabling to prevent the snow load damage. But at this point, the trees have grown, so these cables really don't benefit the trees at this stage of maturity. River birch also in general, and in these trees specifically, have a tremendous network of surface roots. As they grow along rivers, they tend to stay high and dry. But what happened is this causes a tripping hazard. In the case of these trees specifically, they've uprooted the surface of the existing pool deck and the lawn consequently. And just basically, we discussed that the arboricultural benefits of the replacement trees that we've specified in the replacement plan are of far greater value, both aesthetically and specifically in terms of the longevity of and the blockage of neighboring views. Just generally and specifically are better trees than the three trees that are at the end of their useful life.
And can you describe briefly the number and nature of the river birch that you're going to plant as a result of this application, number one, and number two, as to whether or not you're required to do so under the ordinance requirements with regard to tree removal?
Sure. So the tree replacement plan that we have put together and I submitted as part of the application, Rich Keller is going to present a little bit more detail. But just as an overview, the proposed plan, which I did review and walk through with you without the species being indicated as they are clearly in the diagram that Rich will speak to. there are over 40 trees that we're planting. I believe there's 21 that are evergreen trees, 8 mature 18 to 20 foot tall specimen trees, oak, maple, that sort of variety. And then we have a certain number, I believe it's 9 flowering trees. The size and the maturity of the proposed plantings, effectively screen the properties from each other and from the public roadway. Not to mention that this, the new plantings coupled with what we're doing in terms of transplants, we're planning on transplanting somewhere between 15 to 20 of the existing trees, which are currently surrounding the pool, and bringing those into the front of the house. So basically, the only views of the house will be, in the driveway itself. So we're looking to do an evergreen understory planting.
So with the exception of the driveway, is it your opinion that the improvements that are being proposed here will not be seen to the public or the neighbors?
That's correct. I mean, the only openings are the driveways. Nothing else will be visible. And even from the driveways, we're planting on the house corners themselves so that the house corners will be obscured even as you look up the driveway.
Thank you. And so my only question is really a procedural question between you and Rich. Is Rich going to introduce the landscape plan, or are you going to do so?
I'm happy to share it now, but I think if Rich is on, rolling through it.
Let me just suggest this. Let me suggest that Rich share that document, let you identify it.
Okay.
And then we'll let Rich testify from that along with the rest of his testimony.
Okay.
Can you enlarge that? Thank you.
So just to let Rich start from here, this was the same plan that I presented to you guys as an underlayment, which is the colored plan below. And then, I put in and highlighted the orange trees that are shown are the deciduous trees that are being planted. It just kind of spells out where they are. And the evergreen trees are shown in the blue, which you can see the concentration are towards the borders and the corner of the house to do the blocking. The hatch.
Hey, wait. Can we hold on a second here, please? So the last exhibit that we had marked for this application was A2. Is the intent to introduce this, especially since there's some new markings on what was maybe previously submitted with the application? Is this intended to be A3?
Correct.
All right, so hold on.
And then Rob, we'll also like Mr. Doty's email to be marked.
Well, we're gonna, hold on. Let's just, this is what's up on the screen right now, so let's deal with this first.
Sure.
So this is A3 for identification. And Mr. Hirsch, did you prepare this document?
Yes, this is what I went, and when I spoke with Mr. Doty at the window down at the Department of Public Works, this is what we reviewed together when I was filing the application. There is one more PDF that shows the location of the river birch within the foundation envelope of the pool house. I don't know if that's worthwhile introducing now since we're doing that.
All right, well, let's just stay with this. So this is what you prepared dated June 9th, 2021,
Correct.
right?
Correct.
And just other than what you just stated, is there anything else you want to say to describe this document before we move on to another document?
Just that this document, the tree planting, the size, the maturity, and the quantity all exceed what would be required of the homeowner to plant in substitution in any sort of tree replacement plan. That's all.
Brian, what is the typical height of the plantings?
So these plantings, I mean, I've labeled them here, but they vary in range. The evergreens tend to be 18 to 20s, and the
18 to 20 feet.
Tall, correct, which means about 10 to 12 feet wide, which means that any overlap, when the branches are actually touching, any views tend to be 10 to 12 feet up in the air already. So there really isn't looking in between at eye level.
So these are not the type of typical landscaping plantings that you would get from your local nursery. These are substantially taller than that.
Yeah, these are large. I mean, the root balls are usually 6 foot diameter themselves, 3 foot deep. They're mature trees that were grown, field grown for years. They might be themselves 18 to 20 years old already. So they are sizable trees. And likewise, the deciduous trees that we're planting vary in size, but they are between 12 to 14 or 14 to 16 feet. And they tend to be faster growing, so they can be slightly smaller when you install those.
And we talked about the replacement river birches. Are those shown on this plan as well?
Yes, if you look at the rear of the property, there are a grouping of 3 which are shown. Those would again be clump river birch, and they'd be going in at about 14 to 16 feet tall. And so that was the replacement area there in the rear of the property.
Thank you.
Yep.
So those, just to be clear, the measurements on this plan where it shows, let's say for the Norway, I think that says Norway spruce, I'm not sure.
Yep.
10 to 12 feet, does that, or 18 to 20 for the Norway spruce? So that depicts the size of these trees at the time of planting?
Correct.
Thank you.
It's typical to either put a caliper size on them or a height. I mean, all of this is much more specific than otherwise would be required, but after our last meeting, I wanted to make sure when I met with Tom that we were, giving a full explanation of what we were intending to do.
And Brian, this is far in excess of any obligations that the owner has in terms of plantings?
Yes, very much so, especially for the removal of the 3 trees that are in question right now.
And indeed is consistent with what we were talking about before of trying to establish full privacy and no visibility of the improvements that have been proposed.
Correct. I mean, the homeowner is going somewhat out of their way to transplant all of the viable material that is and around where the proposed construction is going to be that would be upset by the construction, and utilizing and saving those trees to create, a more opaque perimeter around the front of the property, and then replanting, with larger, more substantial trees than what was there previously.
Thank you. Rob, are you satisfied with regard to this exhibit?
Yeah, for purposes of identification, I am, yes.
So how do you want to admit this into evidence?
Well, no, so this, you will provide, your team will provide this exhibit to Eileen and to myself tomorrow. But it has been marked as
Okay.
A3 for identification. It has been viewed by the board members, by the public, and the witness that created, or the person that created this document has provided sworn testimony.
Okay, so that's item number 1. Item number 2 is with regard to Mr. Doty's email. How do you want us to proceed? Do you want us to put that up on the screen so that everyone can see it? There you go.
Whatever, well, it's up to you as to who you want, the person you want to introduce this exhibit.
I'm going to have Mr. Hirsch do so since the email was directed to him. So Mr. Hirsch, can you identify what this document is?
So
That's
this
up
is
on
going
our
to be,
screen?
this is going to be marked A4.
So
Okay.
after I went to the window to speak with Tom informally about the matter at hand, I filed a permit to get the 3 river birch trees removed, and also gave an additional plan, both the one that you just marked exhibit A3, and then an additional exhibit which shows that the 3 river birch trees are located within the envelope of the proposed pool house. So that he would have all the information from which to make a determination about these 3 trees, in addition to visiting the property himself. This was his response after we met. I sent a follow-up email, and this was his determination.
And what I read at the beginning of this, with subject to the little bit of editorialization that I added to it, this is what I read previous to the board in my opening statement.
Correct. Yes.
Rob, you satisfied? Can we have this one admitted?
Yeah, just a quick question. So Mr. Hirsch, was Mr. Doty informed that the reason why you were asking him these questions or making the inquiry and submitting the application for the tree removal is that there was a pending Board of Adjustment application?
Very much so. So I, in the actual permit that I filled out, when it says the reason for removal, I don't have that document with me, unfortunately, but it says in the line that we are currently in front of the zoning board. I believe that's one of the questions, and that we would be back on the 21st, and we would like to have his input prior to returning to the board. So he was both verbally and writtenly, indicated that we were currently in front of the zoning board.
Okay, thank you.
And then we have one additional exhibit that is not necessary from our perspective, but if the board would like to see it, it just shows the location of the river birch. If the board would like to see that exhibit, we can put that up and identify that one as well. What's your pleasure?
It's your application, Mr. Forstner.
Okay, Given the fact that it already addresses and the testimony was it's within the building envelope, and so as to be efficient with our time, we won't introduce that particular exhibit unless someone else finds that to be of interest. Are subject to any questions or comments from the board, or if you want to open it to the public. That's all I have with Mr. Hirsch at this time. Do you open it to the public after the witness, or are you going to do so at the end of our presentation?
That's up to the chair.
It looks like he's not on
Yeah,
here.
he just disappeared.
Is there a vice chair?
Hold on, hold on.
Sure.
Eileen, do you know what happened to Joe?
You're muted. You're muted.
Can't hear you.
He is, he's not in the attendees. We can't bring Jessica over because she had to recuse from this matter.
So, Mr. Fortune, the vice chair is recused.
Okay, how would you like to proceed?
Well, let's give it a minute and see.
Technology is a wonderful thing when it works.
Eileen, you still don't see him?
No,
Any chance you can reach out to him by phone?
Yeah, so,
Oh, 1 second, Joe. I'm actually on the phone with him right now. Give me 1
okay,
second.
thank you, Wolfgang.
You said the computer died?
Yeah.
And
Unknown to me, the plug was out of the wall, but I've got it back in now. I'm not sure that I think that you somebody, maybe you, can send me an email with the code that I can click on to get back in.
okay,
I'm not going to be able to vote on this matter because I've missed some of the testimony.
okay. Let me get you an email with the login.
Thanks.
Okay, so his computer was inadvertently unplugged from the wall, and I guess it's a laptop, so it died. He's got back plugged in, and he was just requesting an email with the Zoom link and password, so he can. He's also proposing that he recuse himself from voting on this matter since he has missed part of the testimony.
Eileen, can you send him the link?
I did. I sent him the link already.
Oh, great. Thanks, Greg. So Gary, let's just wait for Joe to get back on and then we'll talk.
So are you going to have him continue to chair even if he's not going to vote?
That's sort of where I was thinking.
You're only down to 6 votes, right?
yeah.
Now 5. If in fact, let's find out, because I don't know how much he actually missed, frankly.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
There's 6 eligible.
I thought we counted 6, including Joe
Yes.
originally.
Correct.
Oh,
1, 2,
well,
4, 5. Is somebody else not?
The eligible people from my notes are Craig, Ms. Sharma, and forgive me for doing it this way so I don't mispronounce people's names, Ms. Siegel, Ms. Harjani, and pardon it, Wolfgang. So those are the people that I have eligible. The question remains as to Mr. Steinberg.
I would suggest that we maybe take a break
Yeah, I'll call.
until maybe 8:10. Does that make some sense?
We're here at the pleasure of the board.
Right? So is that all right with you, Eileen?
That's fine.
Okay, so let's just take a break for 5 minutes. I have on my clock 8:05. Just, hit mute and
I'm sorry, Eileen. I can't hear you.
I have Joe on the phone here, so I'm trying to get him through the problem. Copy the link into your browser up top, but it's there, so you can just copy the link back up in. Okay, and then you'll see the link right there, right? Okay, call me if you need help on it. Sure. He's not going to vote on this case, so they can continue. He said he's going to pull himself out.
Eileen, do you see him?
Nope.
He will not be voting on this case. He made that clear to me on the phone.
Okay,
So you might as well proceed.
all right, so let's first, Eileen, can you take a roll call in terms of the members, please?
Craig Plattner,
Here,
Jody Sharma,
Here.
Joy Siegel,
Here.
Wolfgang Tutores,
Here.
Amy Lawrence,
Here.
Sanju Harjani.
Here.
So, Mr. Forshner, I believe we have now 5 eligible voters. We don't, Eileen, do we have a board member who has been appointed as secretary?
No.
So I think Mr. Forshner, I'll ask you, what I would recommend under these, very unique circumstances is that the board at this point to proceed, first of all, I'm assuming you still wish to proceed.
You do.
Right. So I would ask maybe that the board, under these circumstances, have a board member make a motion and a second to appoint someone to serve as chair for purposes of this proceeding. Because we do, I believe, need a chairman for the effectiveness of the hearing in terms of dealing with issues, et cetera. Do you agree with that, Mr. Forshner?
Absolutely. I think that would be most appropriate.
So, board members, does anyone want to make a motion to appoint someone as interim chairman for purposes of this hearing? Joy?
I'd like to make a motion to appoint Craig.
Is there
Second.
So why don't we take a roll call?
Who was the second? Wolfgang?
Yes.
Yes.
Jody Sharma,
Yes.
Joy Siegel,
Joy, can you unmute yourself, please?
Joe is back.
Goes back.
I understand.
Wolfgang Tutores,
Yes.
Amy Lawrence,
Yes.
Sanju Harjani.
Yes.
Okay, so hey Joe. So in your absence, what we did was we actually had someone make a motion in a second to appoint Craig as interim chairman for purposes of this application, given that you stated that you didn't hear some of the testimony and therefore you wouldn't be able to vote, and then we couldn't get in touch with you.
That's correct.
So, Mr. Forshner, Mr. Plattner, do you have anything to add before we proceed?
no, let's move forward.
Mr. Forshner?
I'm good.
Okay,
So I think where we left off was Mr. Hirsch was done with his direct testimony. So the question to the board and to the board chair was whether or not you were going to open it up to the public at this time, or whether we should proceed with our next witness.
I think this point we can proceed with the next witness, and then at the end we'll open it up for conversation. Does the board have any questions of Mr. Hirsch at this point? Okay, let's move to your next witness.
Mr. Keller?
Yes. I'm here.
You'll recall that he was previously sworn in and qualified, I believe, as both a professional engineer and a professional planner, and he appears in that capacity. Rich, you've had an opportunity to drill down a little bit on the items that we've been talking about, and I believe you have at least one additional exhibit. If you can start walking us through that, I'm going to punt it back to you to proceed.
Yeah, I think Brian covered the landscape plan. There was talk about me doing, but I think he covered the plan. I would just say that the board should keep in mind that trees that are 18 to 20 feet high. If you go out to your house and you look at the second floor gutters on your home, those are about 18 feet high. So these are trees that are over the gutter of the second floor of the house. So they're sizable. And as far as replacement plans we've worked on, this is probably by far the densest, most mature plantings we've dealt with the exception of one or two other properties in town. So it's an extensive landscaping plan. And actually, Rob, all of the exhibits were provided to Ms. Davitt late last week. They're up on the website now. We'll provide additional copies. I think you were copied on some of them, but we'll provide additional copies. But all of these have been up on the website since last Thursday or Friday, the exhibits that we're producing tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Keller. Why don't we still refer to them as exhibits and we'll mark them as we go?
Yep, sure. All right, so I will just so we can get them in, I will go through my two supplemental exhibits, and then I'll talk about some of the concerns the board had. I'm not going to repeat all my testimony, but just drill down on a couple of things. And I know there were some questions and discussions amongst the board that that they may be confused about some of my testimony. So I just want to clarify that. So I'm going to go ahead and share screen again. And I will take down the landscape plan and bring up our an exhibit we provided last week. This is 7 annotated site and neighborhood photos of the Wolf property taken by Casey and Keller on June 18th, 2021. I took these photos myself at around between 9 and 10 in the morning last Friday, the 18th. And the photos I'm going to show you do represent the site as it exists from the street today. So Rob, I think this will be A5, is that correct?
That's correct. And this is consisting, Rich, of 7 photos?
Correct.
Okay, please proceed.
So if we walk through the photos quickly, they're really intended to show the screening that exists on the site today. We go through the photograph number 1. We're looking south along 28 Montview Road toward the Wolf property. You can see the 28 next door. This is the screening that exists between the Wolf property and the property immediately to their left. You can see there's a mixture of both evergreen and deciduous trees, and you can see some brick, but it's very difficult to see. This is all existing landscaping. As we approach the driveway, you can see some more of the evergreen planting that frames the driveway. Again, difficult to see the home. The home will come out about 13 feet total, about 7 foot into the required front yard setback, and this little frame here, but then there'll be a cryptomeria on the corner, which will block that. So you'll see basically landscaping from the view up the driveway as well. The third photograph is moving more towards the center of the site. This is the property looking west from the street towards the existing dwelling. And John showed last week how these 1-story infills will flank the existing porch. The porch will be rescaled to be something more appropriate. There'll be more linear elements added. But this area, this view actually will go away because a lot of the side yard screening, whatever's viable from the side yard now, that gets replaced by those 18 to 20 and 20 foot trees with the 6 foot root balls. Those are going to come in and fill in as understory. So this view will actually go away. We took the next photograph is from the other side, 40 Montview, looking back towards the Wolf property at 30 Montview. You can see the sign for 40. This is the driveway for 40 Montview, our property to the right. That's the one that has it's the Santana property, formerly the Schiller property. I worked on that for all of their additions. That house is set back about 126.5 feet from the street. The Wolf driveway is next to that. Again, this is where Brian's talking about this front yard is going to get understory plantings underneath the tall trees to kind of continue to buffer that view into the site. So the only place you'll be able to look into the property is looking from the driveways up into that, but even that will be concealed with appropriately placed trees at the corners of the house. Photograph number 6, I'm standing at the outermost edge of the proposed garage addition. I'm looking towards 40 Montview. That's looking south-southwest. And you can see that that existing evergreen screening is dense and you cannot see across that. And by the way, because that house is set further back, it actually means it's very difficult to see around the house and see that front corner of the garage anyway. So there's clearly no impact to the house to the right at 40 Montview. And then I turned around and went to the other front corner and I looked back towards 30 Montview to show the existing evergreen screening that exists between our properties today. This will be supplemented on the lower levels. But again, you can see some of the brick house next door, but similar to the first photograph where we're looking at towards where I'm standing from the street, there's existing landscaping. When the Wills moved into the property in 2014, the one thing they did, they wanted to live in the house, feel it, their family grew, as we said. But one thing they did right away was add significant landscaping. And this, we're looking forward for this being round 2 of additional supplemental landscaping to really privatize this site. So that's the existing site it is today. I thought it was helpful to see exactly the view from both of the 2 front corners of the proposed addition, the garage addition, and show the relative screening. I didn't go into the back. A lot of that landscaping will be all new and it'll be even more private. I know some of the board members have been back there. It'll be even more private and secluded once we're done.
Sure, if we mark that, if not, perhaps we can mark that as A5.
That
We're already done.
Good. I guess we're 2 steps ahead of where I'm at.
Okay, and the last exhibit I'm going to introduce is the aerial photo that we had produced last time, but I added some information to it. So this is aerial photo from nearmap.com. The image date again was earlier this year, March 21st, 2021. Property lines are taken from the township tax maps. This was prepared on June 7th and it was revised on June 15th, 2021, as is shown on the lower left-hand corner. And I gave some of this verbally, but it's always, I think, better to see what we're talking about. We had indicated that we think that we are consistent, whether we're at 86 feet, which is where we are now, or we're 73.1 feet, which is 7.2 feet into the setback. We think that we're consistent with the neighborhood at either rate. You can see that the corner property, which faces 47 Delwick Lane, that has a setback of 74 feet. We've surveyed that. We've done all the work on that property. 79 feet for 28 Montview. And then our property is actually one of the larger ones at this time at 86.1 feet. On the right side, which we do not use in our front yard setback, it's used in many towns, such as Summit actually just added houses across the street into their average setback. But if you look across the street, 73.9, almost identical to the former Soren residence at 74. The one at 25 Montview is 64.7 versus 79 across the street. And as you go up the street, you'll see that right across the street from us, the house that it faces both Montview and Lake Road, that has a 47.2 foot offset. We've also surveyed the pool, et cetera, on that property, the landscape replacement plan. And then the outlier in that group, as we indicated, was the Santana residence, formerly the Schiller residence, when we did all the additions in the backyard guest house and the pool cabana, et cetera. This property is at 126.5. What we've superimposed on that also is the blue line is the average as is required by the ordinance, buildings within 500 feet on the same side of the street to the nearest intersection. And that comes out at 80.32. If you were to just eliminate that one, which we think is somewhat of an outlier, the 126.5 for the Santana residence, that average drops to 68.78. So we would be compliant by about 2.5 feet, I think. I'll give you the exact number in a second. But so you can see that we're all around that range. But what's really, I think, most important is that at this, when you're talking about 25 foot setbacks, 18 foot setbacks in some of the R7 zone, or you're talking about 40 foot setbacks in the R4 and the R5 zone, where existings are at 32, et cetera. These differences of 5-6 feet make quite a difference. When you're more than 81 feet back from the traveled way from the road surface, and you're 70 feet back from the road, and you're significantly landscaped, I think it's almost impossible to perceive that difference, to know that that's that one-story portion pops into that average setback. And so I wanted to show this visually to see the difference that one house taken out, which is an outlier, it's the only one that's over 100 feet, in what we've used in the average. And if you just take that out, we become fully compliant by a few feet. But it just rocks around that point. But as I said, I think it's moot because of the existing dense landscaping that will frame views into the property, location of the surgical location of the cryptomeria at the corner, the block looking down the driveway, the infill, an understory infill on the front, means that if you could see it, I don't think you would perceive that because it's so far back from the street, you wouldn't perceive the difference anyways. Those are the two exhibits. I'm going to just touch on a few items that I think the board had questions on last time. And I'm going to just go back to my original exhibit for that. This is not an exhibit. Actually, this is part of the application package that's before you. And I think that we talked about last time that the 3 variances could be approved as a C variance. C variance where the shape, actually, I'm gonna stop sharing for just a second. I know it's a little distracting sometimes. The C hardship variance is where the shape of the lot, and this is important, coupled with the lawfully existing structure, creates a hardship in improving the home and the property without the need for variance relief. And when I say it's important about the existing structure, that was added to municipal land use law back in the mid 80s. Used to be shape, topography, some relevant or unique conditions, but they actually specifically added in that section about lawfully existing structures, and that they can in and of themselves create a hardship when developing a piece of property. And it's not only the location or placement on the property, but it includes the overall dimensions, the functional layout, the structural layout, the location of HVAC and plumbing stacks. So if you try to do something on one floor, you can't cut off your plumbing and electrical or your HVAC to the second floor. All of these things, stair locations, all inhibit the architect's ability to improve the existing home without the need for variance. As the architect stated, the house has several deficiencies. Now, I won't go through them all again, but I'm happy to answer any of them that you have questions on. And John, who's traveling from the southern states, has checked into a motel. So if we need to ask him, he's available. But if you have any questions about them specifically, we can go into them. But there are several deficiencies and inefficiencies that we're seeking to address. We're addressing those deficiencies in a minimal way. But because we're modifying an existing dwelling, those first floor modifications all have consequences in terms of triggering the need for variances for front yard setback, a technical variance for that existing continued side yard setback, and building coverage. And again, as our attorney Gary Forshner indicated, we're not starting from scratch here. If we were to completely demo this site and raise all structures, I've been working with John for more than 30 years. John James could certainly design a home with a functional 3 or 4 car garage that was deep enough and wide enough to accommodate standard vehicles, a dining room that could accommodate family members without having to get up from the table to open the back door. It could accommodate dining rooms that would accommodate family dinners and celebrations. And we could also fit a pool and a pool house on the property, all being compliant with the zoning ordinance requirements. But we're not seeking to tear down this existing building. We think it's better for the community to work with the existing dwelling because tear downs can be intrusive to the neighborhood too, which sort of seeks to, it starts to speak of shades of a C2 variance, which we talked a little bit about last time, but I just want to bolster it in one way. Collectively, on a whole, with all 3 variances, we think this project meets the criteria in support of the C2 criteria in support of the variances. C2 is the flexible C variance, and that is where the proposed plan represents a better planning alternative to one that would be conforming and where the net benefits outweigh the detriments. And certainly we think we advance at least 3 or 4 purposes of the municipal land use law. First, under 4055D is 2A is general welfare. We're allowing an existing resident to adapt their home to meet the needs of their family while increasing the functionality of the dwelling and contemporizing the home to be consistent with amenities that are not uncommon within the community. And we're also, by the way, eliminating a non-forming condition related to the existing pool and patio location. As the architect indicated, we think we're improving the aesthetics of the existing spec house, as John testified. And also section 4055 D2J. We are promoting the conservation of valuable natural resources. It is clearly a greener solution to modify an existing dwelling rather than raise the building, clear the site, and build a brand new home. And so we think that, again, C1 and C2 certainly apply, and I'm not going to go through all of the positive and all through the negative criteria. I'm going to touch on one primarily. First, I want to just quickly touch on the front yard setback we had talked about. We think it's consistent with the neighborhood. if we removed the Schiller Santana, we would exceed the average setback by more than 4 feet. And I don't think you can perceive it anyways, at 81 feet from the paved road. We think it's consistent with other homes in the neighborhood, especially considering the houses on both sides of Montview, which really frames and makes up the neighborhood. Even if you could see the house from the street, given the existing and proposed landscaping, no one would ever know that the proposed house needed variance relief. And again, keep in mind, I think as our attorney indicated, this zone for a 29,000 square foot lot, this zone permits 4-car garages. So they deem that to be appropriate for the neighborhood, not required, but appropriate. We're really looking to get a functional 3-car garage on this property. So it's certainly not a big ask. With regard to that combined side yard setback, I think Gary gave a little planning testimony there, but it was accurate. It's an existing non-conforming condition that's on this lot created by the unusual shape, as we said, because it gets narrow as you move in. And I'll go back to sharing my screen for just a second. It's primarily caused by that right sideline, which skews as it moves back. And you can see at the front of the house, it's 19.47 feet. At the back, it's 15.61. So that narrowing of 3.8 feet means that when you use your back offsets, which is required by the ordinance, when you calculate your combined side yard, the 2 smallest, we have an existing non-conforming condition. When you look at it from the front, the 27.26 and the existing 19.47, we're actually fully compliant. In fact, we exceeded the requirement by 1.41 feet. So we are actually, from anyone looking at this from the street, when you look at this house, you look at the side yard offsets from the street, you would absolutely, if you could even perceive it, anyways, because I don't know if you can really perceive these kind of things from the street, but if you could even perceive it, or you could see it given the landscaping, you would never know that we were deficient in the combined side yard setback, because at the front of the house we are. It's only at the very back that we are deficient. One of the questions asked last time for clarification was, is the garage fully compliant? The garage in and of itself is fully compliant. It's at 27.26 feet, 28 feet to the doors. It is fully compliant with the requirements of the ordinance. In fact, it meets not only the 1-story setback, which is 15 feet, it meets the 2-story setback, which is 25 feet and 28 feet to the garage door. So it's fully compliant. And again, it's only that 1-story, not the full 2-story mass, even though we meet the 2-story setback. With regard to the building coverage variance, just go back to the full screen here. At the last hearing, the architect and I went over the functional deficiencies in the existing dwelling that can be solved through the surgical insertion of these 1-story additions on the house, mostly towards the center in both the front and the rear of the homes. The outlier being the garage, which meets the combined side yard setback, which meets the single side yard setback. And the architect spoke how the 1-story additions break down the perception of the mass. They don't increase it. Last time I think I briefly said basically that the deficiencies in the existing dwelling also extend to the lack of support spaces for a rear yard. You have to get to a bathroom, you either need to go through a side yard, a side door on the side of the house, or you need to go through the garage to get to a bathroom or a laundry room in the existing home. The existing outdoor section is really where you have an outdoor covered patio. That is at a point where that property line is skewing towards you. So it's very difficult to put the pool in a location that's proximate to the parents being able to watch over the pool in any location. You can't get it close enough and meet code to have this area be the supervising area. So the logical thing was to create a separate pool house, which is not uncommon in the neighborhood. We showed some of the photographs last time, how many there were on the neighborhood. Of the 700, we're over on coverage as a result between the pool house and the 5 small additions. We're over by 782 square feet. That's 1.97% over. And the fact that we can be over on building coverage, and again, as was indicated in the start, the fact that we can be over on building coverage and yet under the permitted FAR by 1,060 feet is a testament to the inefficient layout of the existing dwelling. And keep in mind, FAR, which we're way under on, is the true metric of both intensity of use and mass. And that's the one you look to most. And of the building coverage, 782 square feet that we're over, 600 square feet of that is in covered outdoor spaces. which again, so they're open to the air. They don't appear as mass. They actually help to break down some of the second story mass above it because they have roof lines that create play of light and shadow. So they actually tend to break down the mass, not increase it. I think that as we indicated, not only are we under on FAR, we are compliant with lot coverage because we've removed significant amounts of pavement to make sure we got there. And more importantly, in the backyard, where we have not only one, we're the only town in the state that I know have 2 metrics for coverage in the backyard, or 3 really, total lot coverage, which we're compliant with, accessory coverage, which we are compliant with, and one that's unique to Millburn, and that's rear yard unoccupied, where we have to make sure we have 25% of the total lot area has to be behind the house and be unoccupied. And we are well in compliance with those 2 metrics. So clearly, the accessory structure coverage in the rear yard is consistent with the ordinance in the master plan, and the rear yard is clearly not being overcompensated, overdeveloped. And those 3 river birch that do sit in the proposed pool house, they are already causing problems with the pool. If we were to do nothing else but just renovate the pool in its place, those 3 would have to come down because they're already causing structural havoc with the pool, existing pool deck, and ultimately with the pool. So regardless of this application, I think in reality is the Wills, knowing that they've been planning this for the last year. The only reason these haven't come down is because they thought they would be part of a comprehensive landscape plan, but they're already causing problems with the pool, and any homeowner would remove them. And those are the 3 trees that actually, while they are attractive, they have exceeded their lifespan. And they're also the only 3 trees that don't really provide any low screening from neighboring properties into the site. We think that, again, I won't go through all the negatives, but we think clearly there is no negative impact on the neighborhood. Even if you could see it from the street, you'd never know that the proposed house needed variances. Perception would be of a well-hidden, beautiful home tucked behind a forest of trees. And as indicated by Mr. Forshner, many of these, I've worked for, of all the homes in the area, I've worked for many of these current homeowners. They would not be quiet. If they thought that there was a problem, or this was going to cause a problem with them or their neighborhood, they would certainly be on this tonight. We think it'll have no effect on them. And we think that while, again, as Mr. Forshner indicated, it's not dispositive of their endorsement, certainly I think it's telling that no one from the neighborhood, the immediate neighborhood, is at this meeting that I know of, or was at the last meeting. We think the improvements proposed are consistent with the established character of the neighborhood. And we think that the application will clearly neither cause a substantial detriment to the public good or the intent and purpose of the zone plan and zoning ordinance. I cut 12 pages of testimony down to 3. I'm happy to talk about any of the subtle nuances about the way the house doesn't work. John's available, about the decisions that were made. We think it's a good application. John and I pick and choose our applications very, very, very studiously. And we think this is a great application. And we think that it'll be a contribution to the neighborhood and good for the community at large.
Okay. So there are no reports that we have with the exception of one from Tom Doty. I have nothing further for Mr. Keller. I think his testimony was very comprehensive. I would think that now you would want to open it to the public unless there's questions or comments from the board.
As Mr. Forshner stated, any questions or comments from the board first regarding Mr. Keller's testimony? If not, anyone in the audience with any questions for any of the professionals or the applicant? Looks like there are none. Is that where we are, Eileen? You don't see anybody? Any comments from the audience in regards to this application? Looks to be none. In that case, I will close the public portion of the meeting and open it up to the board members to discuss. Who would like to start us off with this application?
I'll go ahead and start. I think it's a very carefully tailored application. I think it's a very thoughtful renovation. And I think the changes that they're proposing make total sense given the design of the house and the shape of that plot of land. And I personally would support this application.
Who else would like to opine? Anyone? All right, I'll say a couple words then. I'm troubled with this application to find a hardship. I see what everyone's talking about, but we still have an acre, almost an acre size lot here. And we're putting a lot of stuff in there. 782 square feet. We could certainly minimize the size of the pool house and tailor things to become a little more modest in size to accommodate this. So I'm still on the fence as to my support for this application, but I do struggle with it. Joy?
I'm actually, I agree with Craig. The part that I struggle the most with is the hardship in reference, in particularly about the building coverage. I appreciate the landscaping. I think it's beautiful. It's wonderful. An excessive amount of time was spent on that. But when I look at the site plan and I look at it compared to other houses, I don't understand why this house has hardships. I mean, I was going to ask the size of the dining room. I really don't see the word hardship at all.
I'm having the same dilemma as Craig and Joy have mentioned. The hardship hasn't been clear to me or articulated.
Thank you, Joy and Jody. Any other further comment?
Am I allowed to opine, although I'm not allowed to vote?
Absolutely, Amy.
Yeah, so in that case, I would agree with those sentiments. I also don't, I'm concerned about the hardship issue. It's not clear to me that there is one and what that is.
Thank you, Amy. In that case, do I have a motion?
Mr. Pletner?
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, sorry. So I just want to remind the board in terms of assessing this application that the applicant has presented proofs in support of variance relief for the building coverage, front setback and side combined under both C1 and under C2. So we are very familiar, and I believe some of you even referenced it, with regard to the proofs for the C1, which, as we know, talks about narrowness of a specific piece of property or certain physical features or structures actually on a particular piece of property that would cause a particular and exceptionally practical difficulty upon the owner, developer, et cetera, with regard to a proposed development application. That's C1. With regard to C2, which the applicant has also provided proofs in support of, the issue on a C2, it's called the flexible C, and that's where an application, as in this case, relates to a specific piece of property, and the purposes of municipal land use law would be advanced by a deviation from the zoning ordinance requirements, and the benefits of the deviation from the zoning ordinance requirements substantially outweigh any detriment. So, and as was stated, I believe even by Mr. Forstner and also by Mr. Keller, the key is whether the proposal provides a better zoning alternative or improved planning and zoning that's going to benefit the community, and certainly not just for the desires of the private property owner. So I would just, I wanted just to interject just to remind the board that the applicant is proposing approval based on either or both, whether it's C1 or the hardship or the C2 on the benefits outweighing the detriments. Thank you.
Is there a special way you want this voted upon?
Well, it's really up to the board whether they want to break it down as to whether the applicant made sufficient proofs to get relief under C1 or C2. I would recommend that based on, unless there's any additional comments from the board prior to a vote, and I believe we have 5 eligible voting members, I would suggest, Mr. Pletner, that you break it down and maybe have a motion to approve based on C1, and then a motion to approve based on C2.
Okay, we've never done that before.
I think that basically given the proof, or you can just do it together. If you feel strongly about the C1 and C2, you can just take a vote, and that's what we do typically do. But if the feelings of the board are particular as to whether the applicants met the proofs for one of the categories or not, I think it's appropriate to take a separate vote. It would certainly help the attorney in terms of any type of resolution that would be prepared.
Noted. Okay, so then, so you want to do 6 individual votes on each of the?
No. It's really up to the board, but what I'm suggesting is that you may want to first, somebody might make a motion to approve or deny the application based on the proof submitted for under C1, and then you'd have a vote for that, and then you'd have a separate vote for C2 under the variances, or you can take them individually. That's up to the board.
We'll take them together and vote in those ways under C1 and C2. So
Can I ask a question for Rob?
Sure.
So
Sure.
my question would be, how would the vote be interpreted in case the two voting outcomes are different, if we did 2 separate?
Well, if the applicant just needs to meet their burden of proof under either C1 or C2. So if hypothetically you were to approve this application under C1 and deny it under C2, the application would be approved. Because the applicant just needs to meet their burden of proof under one or both for all 3 variances, by the way. I mean, and also just to remind this board also has on occasion approved certain variances based on C1 and other variances in the same application based on C2.
Mhm.
So it's really, it's up to the board, and you can also make them a separate 3 separate votes under building coverage for C1 and C2. I mean, you can do it any which way you want. I think that under the circumstances, I would recommend, based on what I'm hearing from the board, that there be separate votes on the variances. Remember that it's for building coverage, front setback and side combined, first under maybe C1 and then separately under C2, unless any board member has a particular concern as to one of the variances that is being asked for.
Well, I was going to ask if there's one of these variances that we all actually agree upon and don't, is there any one that we don't have a problem with and could just vote on that individually and at least get that off the table? I'm thinking specifically of the side combined C variance.
And would you suggest that under Wolfgang under C1 and C2, for example?
I suppose, yes, I would.
Okay, so you can.
So is there a motion? Is there a motion to approve the side yard setback under C1 and C2?
I'll make a motion to approve that.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Give us a roll call, Eileen.
Craig Plattner,
Yes.
Jody Sharma,
Yes.
Joy Siegel,
Yes.
Wolfgang Tutoras,
Yes.
Yes, from me.
Chandru Harjani,
Yes.
That motion passes. Is there a motion for the front yard setback under C1?
Keep in mind, if you're okay with the garage, we need that front yard setback. You've already given the combined side yard setback, but the only way that that becomes effective is if you also give us the front yard setback.
Once again, is there a motion?
I can pass the motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Yeah, so this is a motion with regard to the front yard setback under what? Under C1 and C2?
C1.
Or under C1? Okay.
C1 and C2. We'll do C1 and C2.
Okay, C1 and C2. Is that Chandru and Wolfgang, is that accurate for C1 and C2 motion?
Yes, that's correct.
Absolutely. I think
Thank
it's
you.
more for C2 than C1, but yes, yes, on the whole, yes.
Craig Plattner,
No.
Jody Sharma,
You're on mute, Jody.
Joyce Siegel,
No.
Wolfgang Titouris,
Yes.
Amy Lawrence,
I'm sorry, I thought I was
He's
not
not
allowed.
eligible.
oh, I'm
You're not
sorry,
eligible.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Chandru
Yes, sir.
Harjani,
Yes.
That motion is denied.
Correct.
Moving forward to the
So before we,
the public portion is closed at this point. So
I think if Mr. Plattner, I mean, sorry, Mr. Forster, is there anything you want to say procedurally?
yes. So I'm wondering if we eliminated the other provisions, if the board could see fit to allow the coverage variance to allow the pool house. If we remove the balance of the improvements that have been proposed.
I don't know. Now we're changing the whole.
I don't know what that means.
I defer to Rob. I mean, we're not
Yeah,
changing the application.
well, I think, Gary, I'm not really sure either whether, you're now trying to amend the application after we're in the process of voting on the application. I
That's
asked if
because
there
the
was,
board denied several or one of the variances, and that's why, we're doing it based upon that and trying to see if the board, because you've effectively eliminated the garage at this point regardless.
so what is your ask at this point?
So if we eliminate the rest of the improvements to the house, the kitchen, the dining room, et cetera, and the only thing is we're asking for a coverage variance for the pool house, whether the board would make a motion and grant the coverage variance necessary for the pool house.
I'm not comfortable doing that. That's not the testimony, and that's we're not going to start to play let's make a deal at this point. I defer to you, Rob.
I
as the board
submit that
attorney.
that is part of the application that's before you. We're only taking off pieces of it that the board could have voted on separately.
Show me the numbers, and that's not.
We
That's
can,
not what-
give us a minute, I'm sure we can get you those numbers.
I think it's a little difficult, Mr. Forstner, as Mr. Plattner, I believe, is alluding to, for the board to be asked to vote on the building coverage variance at this stage based on some revised plans. So we don't know right now, for example, right now you have a deviation of 1.97%, I believe, in terms of building coverage. What I think you're saying is that if you remove some portions of your application, that 1.97% number will be decreased.
Correct.
But we
can give you that number.
All right, but Gary, hold on. So the problem, I believe, though, is that the board is in a position where they don't know what that number is, what it's looking like, what specific portions of the application that you are removing. So I think it's difficult at this point. I understand where you're going, but I think it's difficult for the board to make an informed determination at this stage based on what you're, I think, proposing to do. So, Mr. Chairman, let me make maybe a suggestion that the board can either just proceed to vote on the application as is, or what I would recommend, I think under these, again, unique circumstances, is if the applicant wishes to remove things as opposed to add things, that maybe they provide that information to the board and ask that the matter be carried for just a vote as to the building coverage request. But I don't believe, I agree with you, Mr. Chairman. I don't think the board's in a position right now just to say, yes or no, based on a verbal, we're going to remove this and we're going to remove that. Can you please vote?
We certainly would consent to carry it to the next hearing for that very purpose.
So at this point, we voted on 2 of the components to this application. Now you would like to reconsider your building coverage. Is that correct?
Based upon what the board has voted upon, yes.
Then, we can grant that at this point and rehear this application as it pertains to that one component.
That's what we would ask that you do.
Then I think we should still vote on this current application as it stands.
That would require us to start over from scratch. I don't know that
Yeah.
there's efficiency there.
No, I'm saying that the current building coverage as it's proposed to tonight, are we just going to pull that off then?
Well, but what I'm suggesting, Craig, is that the matter be carried just for purposes of this building coverage issue and vote based on the representation that they're going to provide I guess, a revision just as to that particular issue. The problem for the applicant is that once this board votes conclusively on all the requests for variance relief, the case is over, and then the applicant would have to, in essence, file an appeal, potentially refile or file an amendment, and then there's an issue always of res judicata and collateral estoppel if it's substantially similar. So this is an opportunity, I think, that I would recommend to the board, just to have the cleanest application, up or down, that you can have, and that this way the applicant would be provided an opportunity, at least as the building coverage, to submit, something additional, and particularly the fact that they're not looking for more building coverage, they're actually looking for less.
So Eileen, what does it look like? You're muted.
I think considering there's really no more testimony, I don't know how much testimony would be envisioned with what they're proposing to do, how much time we would need to allot to the applicant. What do you think?
Mr. Forstner, how quick can you do it?
I don't know. You know what? John James has his hand raised. Let me just.
Oh.
John, you're muted.
I just had a general question of the board. It's very hard sitting on this side of the fence when there are no questions and almost no deliberation to have a sense of the board about any of the variances. So I'm just saying I'm a little bit confused and getting a little bit of mixed messages because there hasn't been any deliberation in either of the 2 previous hearings except for the no vote. So it's just very hard as an architect who felt we had gone way under building cover, over building coverage, but we're way under on FAR, to know how to deal with revisions to the application when there's actually been no comments from any of the board members previous to a vote. So I just wanted to say that it would be helpful if you had questions. We'd be glad to answer questions before it was closed to the public, and to try to at least answer those questions. And it's very hard to sit here and try to take the meaning from a vote without any comments. So just a comment from me as an architect. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Forstner, how long do you think you'll need going forward to do this?
I'm guessing about 15 minutes.
Do you want to do them on July 19th, which would be our next meeting?
How many you got on that now?
I had 5, then we just carried that Zhao, which is the shed on the property line. So I would have, this would be number 7.
15 minutes. I mean, that's what I have to keep to.
Okay. If we can get a motion for it to be carried till July 19th, that would be appreciated.
Can I have a motion to carry this to July 19th? A second, please.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes.
For the record, that'll
so-
be July 19th
Yeah.
at 7 PM with no further notice to the public.
Correct, and that will, and the application will be considered, continue to be heard virtually
Thank
on
you.
July 19th, 2021 at 7:00 PM. No
Thank-
further notice to be provided by the applicant.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. I'll pass it back to Joe, but we'll be moving on to our next application.
My
Millburn Group 2. There you go.
My computer knows when to pull the plug.
Yeah,
all I can
I saw.
say.
Yeah, thanks for prisoning by fire.
Right.
Hey, Craig, that's on your CV for life now.
Yeah, I know that.
They
That's
can't
great.
take that away from you.
Fantastic. Oh, let me just get Jessica back. Hang on one sec.
Okay, we need,
Or Archie.
we need Jessica back.
Yeah, I think she's over there, right? Yeah.
There she is.
Okay.
Okay, the next matter on the agenda is 157 Long Hill Drive, which is a property that is under construction. You guys may be interested to know that when I showed up to look at the property, the two workmen who were working on it panicked. They thought that they had done something wrong and the town had sent me to close the job down or something. They were pretty upset that I was there. But in any event, this is the property on the corner of Long Hill Drive and White Oak Ridge Road, near the Hartshorn School, that end of Long Hill. Okay, so who do we have representing the applicant here? The applicant is something called the Shale Group 2.
That's me. First, I'd like to thank the board for hearing my case. I'm the Shale Group 2, which is the entity that owns the property. I purchased the property to renovate it and resell it, and I'm appearing before you as the.
Does he have to be sworn in?
Yeah, just
Oh.
hold on a second. Hold on a second.
Sorry about that.
So, Mr. Goldberg, do you own the property?
I do.
Okay. So why don't we get this, the witness sworn, please?
Good idea.
If you would just raise your right hand, please. Do you affirm the testimony you're about to give tonight to be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Just state your name for the record.
Jonas Goldberg.
Now, this is a matter where there is one variance being sought. And Eileen, will you explain to the board members what this particular variance is and what you called out a variance for here?
I believe it's for the 80-foot setback for a corner property. It needs to be set back 80 feet from the front lot line, and this is not.
Okay, so the extent of the variance requested is 25 feet.
Correct.
All right, proceed.
Okay, as I was saying, I'm the owner of the Shellbrook Group 2, which is the entity that owns the property. I purchased the property to renovate it and resell it. I'm appearing before you as the owner, and I have appeared before this board once before. Although I am not practicing anymore, I am also a licensed architect in New York, and my license is in good standing. The property is zoned R4 and is currently being renovated under permit number 21-0352, approved March 10th, 2021. I am here today asking for one variance to add a modestly sized deck, roughly 27 feet by 14 feet or 459 square feet, onto the end of the house where the kitchen and family room will be. The deck is sized to accommodate a seating area, a table, a grill, and stairs down to the yard. The deck will be located adjacent to the main usable yard on the property and will sit roughly 5 feet above the grade. As I said before, I'm requesting one variance specifically related to the deck. Section 609.5 of the zoning ordinance requires that accessory use structures on corner lots shall be no closer to the street line than 2 times the required front yard setback, which in this case would be 80 feet, and shall not be in the front yard. I am requesting relief from the 2 times front yard setback requirement that this section places on corner lots. And I'd like to share my screen now. I can do that. Can you all see the screen?
All right. Yes.
Everything I'm going to show you is in the packets that I've submitted, so nothing new. So the property itself sits on the corner of Long Hill and White Oak Ridge, as you can see here. There are dense mature plantings all along the frontage of White Oak, and smaller but still mature plantings along Long Hill Drive, except of course where the driveway is. View 1 is from across the street on White Oak Ridge. I should note that these photographs were taken before the leaves on the trees came out, so the screening around the site is much more dense now than it was when I took these photographs. You can see the house is behind these plantings and you can't see the house at all. In this photograph, the deck would be located on the left side, generally where that arrow is pointing.
Mr. Goldberg,
Yes.
for this view 1, what was the date when this photograph was taken?
It was around March.
Okay, and you took these photographs?
I took these photographs, not the aerial. That was from Google Maps. View 2 is from the corner of Long Hill Drive and White Oak. Again, you can see the mature plantings along White Oak Ridge, the smaller but still mature plantings along Long Hill Drive. The deck in this case would be located on the far side of the house in this view. View 3 is also from White Oak Ridge Ave on the opposite corner. The deck is located on this side of the house. And again, although the plantings are not blooming yet, the deck would still be completely hidden from view from the street. This is from the same angle, but you've now moved on to the property. So where the arrow, you can see a small 1-story piece of the house there. This has now become a 2-story piece, and the deck would be off of the end of that, basically starting where that 1-story wall is. And the last view, I was up on that 1-story roof, which is basically the start of the deck. The deck would be located in front here. And this is a panoramic where White Oak Ridge is along here. This is the neighbor's house on White Oak Ridge and other neighbors to the right. So the main challenge with this site and accessory structures is that the site is 200 feet long north to south and roughly 102 feet from White Oak Ridge to the adjacent side yard property line, sorry, the opposite side yard property line. If you adhere to the 80-foot setback from the street and the 12-yard setback for accessory use structures on the 2 side yards, it leaves only this very dark swath that I've highlighted here to where you can put an accessory use, so a deck or a patio. That is roughly 10 feet wide, which is pretty narrow for outdoor living space by today's standards, especially in a neighborhood of this nature. And it also really prevents a deck from connecting to the house in a meaningful way. So this little diagram on the right is a blow up of the second story area here. It's really still a split level, so it's up a half level from the ground. And you can see where the conforming area for accessory use sits. There is a roof on this side right here, and that roof level where it connects to the house is actually higher than the floor level of the family room inside. The deck itself will be set back from White Oak Ridge roughly 55 feet, so 25 feet less than the 80-foot requirement. It will not be in the front yard. As you can see by this 40-foot setback line here, it's set back from that. It will also not be any closer to White Oak Ridge Ave than the front of the house or the front of the adjacent house here. This survey does not show obviously all of this house, which has a built-out entry piece in the front here, which sticks out pretty much even with the front of my house. The other two sides of the deck, the north side and the east side, will be conforming. And that is basically my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Well, I have one question. Can you tell us if this is permitted, how close the nearest neighbors would be to this structure, right? That you're asking for?
From here, from this side of the deck to this property line, would be about 55 feet, roughly.
Are you keeping the existing patio?
I am keeping that existing patio, just cleaning it.
Got it.
Did you say the height of the deck would be 5 feet?
Roughly 5 feet above existing grade.
I have a question. Is there any landscape being planned for the edge of the site? I guess in this drawing, the upper edge?
Along this?
Yeah, exactly.
No, I was not planning to add any additional planting along that edge, which you can sort of see here. Again, the trees are not filled in this photograph. You can barely see anything when with all these leaves here.
So when I went to the property, I mean, it's obviously very well screened from White Oak Ridge, but it seemed like the windows on that house, because of the height of the deck will be, how high off the ground will it be again?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
How high will the deck be off the ground?
Roughly 5 feet above existing grade. Are you concerned about these people being able to see the deck?
Yes.
So if you look along all these houses in the back here, you can actually see these people's patio from here. You can see these people's deck. You can see their patio, and you can see all the patios going along here. So all the patios in this neighborhood, or decks, whatever they have, are quite visible from other neighbors.
Any other questions from board members?
Possible to build it lower?
It is possible to build it lower. I don't have the actual drawings for it yet, but it's going to step down 2 steps to the main deck level. Any more than that, the deck becomes more complicated, where I have to add railings on the steps and may require it to be bigger.
Any other questions of this witness? Any other testimony that you have, Mr.
Goldberg?
I'm sorry.
No, I am the only one.
You're it.
I'm it. I'm all you got.
Are there any questions from members of the audience? Is there anyone in the audience who seems to have a question, Eileen? No?
There are none.
All right, let's ask if there's anyone in the audience who has a statement he or she would like to make with respect to this application.
There are none.
There are none? I'll close the public portion of the meeting and ask if any board members have any comments they would like to make. Yes, Wolfgang.
I have a comment / question actually for Eileen, and it's actually with respect to the addition that's already been really constructed, it seems, if I'm reading attachment F correctly, that there's it's non-conforming as per the side. It's an existing non-conforming because it matches up with the rest of the house. But would that not require a variance?
Or I don't know
I
what
can
you're
answer. So the existing portion of the house that is 2 stories is non-conforming. I did not touch that other than to re-side it. The new addition in the back of the house is pushed back, the 2-story portion, so that it conforms. Here, let me share my screen again. This is the plot plan that was submitted with that permit application. So this is the existing non-conforming back of the house. And because it's 2 stories, it should be 22 feet. It is clearly not. The new addition I put on here, which is considered 2 stories because it has sort of a basement space below it, partial basement space, is set back the 22 feet required for a 2-story addition. Same, there is also an addition here that is 2 stories that I put on, that is also conforming to the 22-foot setback.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Any other comments from board members? Yes, Amy.
No, I don't have a question.
Oh, I thought you did. Is there a motion on this case?
I'll just make a comment quick because I think we should have some comment. I'm not bothered by the deck, but I am bothered by the height of the deck. 5 feet off the ground, 6-foot person stands on it. Their head's now 11 feet off the ground. I think that's pretty high. So I would like to see it lower.
As I said before, that may require the deck to get a bit larger.
I'm sorry, I think the public portion.
Public portion is closed at this point.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize.
Yes.
Is there anything ordinance-wise with respect to the height of the deck? I mean, I understand that we're here to discuss the placement on the lot of the deck with respect to the side, with respect to the setback, but the height, I mean, a 5-foot deck is a pretty standard height.
5 feet off the ground?
Sure. Same all the time.
Yeah, 4 or 5 feet.
Yeah, and also, I mean, the house next door certainly has it.
Well, I'm not necessarily using other people's houses as justification.
Well, I mean, I'm just not aware of anything that says you can't have a 5-foot high deck.
No, just merely saying I'd like to see it lower.
Yeah.
I'll share.
Sorry,
Oh, go
ahead, Amy. You can go ahead. I'll sit after.
Now, I was just going to say that my concern isn't so much the height of the deck as it is that when I also went to the house, and when you stand in the backyard, you do very prominently see into the rear neighbor's yard. And I think when you're at the 5-foot height and sort of looking into like the what Joy had brought up previously, that there's no plan for any kind of plantings or things to sort of around the rear or the other side of the house, that troubles me a little bit, because I think it's very well screened from the street, but I think you kind of stand at that deck looking right into the other neighbor's house. And it's a concern I have.
Jessica.
I was going to say that, I'm historically not, a huge fan of decks, but when I went to, of height, but when I went to this house, I just feel like the location of it, that it is still, relatively speaking, well screened. And it didn't bother me as much as I thought that it was going to. Just my 2 cents.
Is there a motion in this case?
I'll move approval.
Is there a second?
Can we, as we've done in the past, agree to approve with some conditions for some, additional planting or screening?
Yes, we've done that.
That would be my personal preference, but if we want to put it to a vote just as is, I'm happy to vote on that as well.
Do we have, are we in a position to make such a stipulation, given that it's not with your, I mean, that has nothing to do with really the placement of the location of the.
I guess that's a fair point.
I think asking for screening is not unreasonable.
It's not a matter of reasonable and unreasonable. I mean, do we have position to actually, do we have a position, since we're not actually addressing a zoning issue with the screening, are we in a position to actually make that request? Might be unreasonable.
Yeah, I don't see why not.
I mean, Robert, I don't know, maybe that's a question for our attorney.
Yeah, so again, you are certainly permitted by law to impose reasonable conditions on any proposed approval of a variance application if the conditions go to mitigating the condition for which the variance relief is being requested. So in this case, there's a requirement that the deck certainly cannot be in the front yard, but it is less than the required 80-foot setback, which is, I guess, 55 feet. And so if you believe that there are mitigating circumstances with, for example, some landscaping that could alleviate any perceived detriment from granting that application, that would certainly be a reasonable condition.
Though the setback that's in question is actually on the White Oak Ridge side, which is in fact quite well screened.
I agree with that. Yeah.
That's
right,
what
but
you
are
have to
you
take into
creating a privacy
consideration.
issue in your backyard?
How is it? I don't even know how that comes up in the scope of what we're ruling on here.
Well, is a deck creating a privacy issue?
So I think that what we ought to do is see if there's
Setback from that side of the yard.
Right, so arguably you could contend that the landscaping, if you imposed it as a condition in the rear, it is not addressing the reasons for which the setback variance is required.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll let that go then.
I think there was a motion made, was there not,
Yeah.
to approve?
I'll second.
Is there a second? Wolfgang, second.
Craig Plattner,
No.
Jody Sharma,
Yes.
Joy Siegel,
No.
Wolfgang Tutoris,
Yes.
Jessica Glad,
Yes.
Joseph Steinberg,
Yes.
Amy Lawrence.
Yes.
The application has been approved.
Thank you all very much.
You're welcome. The next case we have, and I'm going to ask you guys to turn to the second page of your agenda. This is 78 Kane Road. And here there's a generator. This is a generator case.
Yes, I don't know if I could ask whoever is presenting this, if they could raise their hand, please, because I don't see. Okay, there we go.
Is the applicant here?
Yes.
Nancy Grande. You're muted and we can't see you.
Hi.
Now we can see you and hear you. What is your relationship to the property?
My husband and I own the property.
Okay.
If you would just, well, let's get her sworn. If you would just raise your hand, your right hand, please. Do you swear from the testimony about to give in tonight's Zoom hearing to be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Just state your name, spelling your name for the record, please.
Nancy Grandy, Nancy Grande.
Now, before you begin, I'm going to ask our zoning officer to tell us what the issue is here.
Me, I don't have I don't have the applications, so I have really. Want to install a generator, and I believe it does not meet the 12-foot required setback from the side property line.
Correct.
Okay, proceed.
I'm sorry. Do you want me to describe
Yes, I
it?
want you to proceed.
Okay. So we're interested in putting in a generator. I'm now working from home and my son is doing a degree from home. We have had several power outages. So where we would like to put the generator is next to where the gas line and the electrical box is, and it's 9 feet from the property line. My husband also requires 24-hour, well, he requires the electrical power for a medical issue overnight.
Looking at the plot plan, the generator is on the left side of your house. Is that correct?
Correct. As you're facing the house, it's on the left.
Yes. And there are other electrical pieces of equipment in that area?
The air conditioner is also on that side of the house.
Questions from the members of the board?
I have a question.
Yes.
Are you required to screen the generator? What type of screening are you proposing?
That's an area of the house where we already have a lot of plantings, and we will, it's not going to be very visible depending on how many more we could put in still within our property line. We could screen, but it's not a very, it's not an exposed area right now.
Well, the reason I asked is that you do have beautiful plantings, I noticed, and they're kind of in groups, and there seems to be, at least from my take, there was sort of an opening between the two groups, and it seems like that view would actually be directly where you're proposing the generator.
Mm-hmm. Oh, we could definitely close up that area. Our dog will miss it, but we could do that. That's no problem.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question?
Yes.
I heard your testimony, and I think you stated that the generator is going to be 9 feet away from the property line?
Correct.
Okay, because the application says 8 feet away. So I just want to know which one it is.
I believe it was, do you have
I would
it?
go with the 8 if we're a little unsure.
Yeah, my understanding it was 9. I'm sorry. That was the person who helped us, or the company drew up the
Yeah,
diagram.
I mean, I think the diagram that we have with the application materials maybe shows approximately 9 feet 3 inches, but the application materials say 8 feet.
Okay, we would have to check that. I apologize for that discrepancy.
I think if, well, it's really up to the board, but certainly I believe, as Eileen alluded to, better to be cautious and grant the extra, or at least consider the extra footage.
And how tall would this proposed generator be from the ground?
It's a standard size. We would have to look that up.
About 24 inches, if I'm not mistaken. They're about 2 feet tall. They're not very tall.
How long? How tall?
About 24 inches tall. They're not.
No, they're definitely, I have one. They're definitely taller than that.
Yeah, I guess it, yeah.
Or you are willing to put evergreens in front of that generator,
Certainly.
whether it's back 7 feet, 8 feet, or 9 feet from the property line. There is room to put, I'm asking a question. Is there room to put some evergreens in there?
So I believe the comment was from facing into the house. There's some space between the house and what is a line of evergreens and hemlock trees, which is quite dense. So I think it was that space that was commented that we could place another tree or something to hide any view of the generator. And yes, there is space there.
Sorry, if maybe I'm a little bit confused, because if I'm recalling how the site looks, I mean, that side of the house, I mean, viewing it from the side seems almost impossible because it's very heavily screened. I mean, it seemed to me that the only way it's visible is from the front, and that's
From the where?
from the front is where you would potentially see it, not from the side, but from the front. And so are we, well, and Joy, maybe I'm misunderstanding what you're saying, but I thought that it seems like it's the front screen that we're talking about here, not on the side or something.
That's interesting because I saw it just the other way around.
Really? All right.
I saw very, very heavy screening in the front of the house, to the point where I couldn't even get through there to actually get to the side of the house without going up the driveway from the neighbor's driveway and trespassing on their property, which I was not inclined to do. Yes, Amy.
I was going to make a different comment, but I actually did walk in there today. Maybe because I'm small. I walked right up the side of the house and it looked fairly well screened to me. And so my concern isn't so much about that, but I am no expert on generators, but I also have one. And when it once a week, the generator has to like recharge or whatever that is, right? It's very loud. So my only concern or question, I guess, is how far away from that location is the neighbor's house? Is the noise going to be a disturbance?
Right, so the neighbor has a fairly large driveway in that space, and then it's their 2-car garage. So they are, and they're fully aware and on board with our plans as well. So their living space isn't right there. That's their garage.
Well, but there's a second floor above the garage, is there not?
There is, yes.
But the house also, I didn't measure it, but it does appear to be about 20+ feet away, from the property line.
So I guess the other question is, why there? Could you put it in the backyard?
So there's no real place in the backyard to put it without it basically like standing in the middle of the yard. But the company that's putting it in suggested that the best place to put it is where the gas line enters the house, and that's the location. It's also the location of the electrical panel.
I would be in favor of this application if the applicant were willing to do some screening around that generator. And there is at least 8 feet to the property line. Now, someone just said that they thought that the screening should be in the front of the generator toward the street. But I found that area totally impenetrable, that area on the side of the house. Can you enlighten us a little bit, Mrs. Grande?
Well, again, my dog and I go through that little path quite often. It is narrow. There's a big hemlock tree coming over, but we could put another bush in that area. I would have to really walk around to the other side. From my perspective, when I look from the front of the house, it seemed very dense on the side going over to the neighbor's property, and we had put in some evergreen trees along there already. I would really, see where we have space. That we have no problem putting in some more camouflage, not a problem.
I don't know how this would be worded, Rob. That's the problem.
Well, no, I think that you could certainly, if you were so inclined, have a condition to require, screening around the generator. So to ensure that with evergreen plantings, so to ensure that between the new plantings and what's there existing, that the generator is properly screened from the public road and neighboring properties.
Mrs. Grande, can you live with that?
Yes, that's absolutely fine. Thank you.
Is there a motion
I'll make a motion to approve.
with that condition? Yes?
Yes, yes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Craig Plattner,
Yes.
Jody Sharma. Yes. Joy Siegel,
Yes.
Wolfgang Tatoris,
Yes.
Amy Lawrence,
Yes.
Jessica Blatt,
Yes.
Joseph Steinberg.
Yes. Congratulations.
Okay,
You won.
yay.
You won.
Thank you. Well, no power outages, then we'll all win. Thank you.
Good. All right, the next case is Hanson at 40 Elmwood Place in Short Hills. Is the applicant here
Yes.
or someone representing the applicant?
Hanson is here.
Mr. Hanson.
Good evening. All right, if you just raise your right hand, please. Do you swear from testimony about to give in tonight's Zoom hearing to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Your name and address for the record.
Paul Hanson, 48 Elmwood Place, Short Hills, New Jersey.
Thank you.
Proceed.
This application is for a variance for us to install a couple of air compressors for central air conditioning in the house. Our houses are 16 feet apart in the Glenwood section. And so the compressor would be too close to the property line as the laws permit. I had previously come before this board several years ago to install a backup generator for the same variance reason, because the houses are too close and the property line is too close. I was granted that. I think I included that in the application. And so we'd like to put the air compressors next to the generator on the same side of the house. The condition of my previous approval was the topic of what was just discussed, was the screening. We did at the time put in some additional shrubs around the generator to shield it as was requested. Two of the shrubs burned out because they happen to be on the side of the exhaust of the generator. I have not replaced those in anticipation of getting this variance. The plan would be to move those shrubs up closer to the chimney, a couple of feet, so it's further away from the generator, and then extend the hedge that's currently on the side of the generator further back to then cover the new air compressors that are going in as well, so that it would be consistently shielded as the generator currently is.
You have no problem with additional plantings around the proposed units?
None at all.
I noted that with the existing unit that is there, it seemed that there were plantings on 2 sides instead of 3 sides of that unit. Is that because the shrubs burned down?
Yes, those shrubs burned out and they were pulled out and were not replaced because of anticipation of moving them up and further away from the generator. Otherwise, apparently they get burned out every couple of years from the exhaust.
You said moving them up. Does that mean moving them back toward the back of the house?
No, if you're looking at the house, the fireplace is on the right side of the house. The shrubs are probably 4 feet back from the end of the fireplace or from the chimney. And so it would be the intent that we would move them forward to the chimney by 2 more feet so that the exhaust has more space between the generator and the shrubs, so that I don't have to replace the shrubs every 2 years when they get burned out.
But as far as the new condensers are concerned, you have no problem screening those as well?
No, that would certainly be our intent. We have a hedge that runs from basically the back of the house to the creek in the back. And so by putting in the hedges to cover the air compressor would essentially continue the line of the existing hedges in the back of the house. So we have absolutely no concern about doing that.
Any other questions from board members? And you're seeking a 4-foot variance, is that correct?
Yes.
Any other questions from board members? Are there any questions from the audience? Eileen?
No.
Is there anyone in the audience who has a statement he or she would like to make?
No one.
I'll close the public portion of the meeting. Board members, what are your thoughts?
I would support this. The generator's already in the location on the side of the house. The adjacent property also has its units facing the same side. I think it's it's an appropriate location as long as it's well screened. I think it's, something I could support.
Anyone else?
I agree with Amy. I have no issue with this. They're considerably quieter than the generator. So the fact the generators are there, the air conditioners don't add any more noise pollution. So I'm fine with it.
Also, there's a hardship here, given that it's only 16 feet gap between the 2 properties. So there's not much room there. So from that perspective too, I would be supportive.
Is there a motion that includes the screening?
Motion to approve with appropriate screening as discussed.
Second?
Second.
Troy seconded it. Eileen?
Craig Plantner,
Yes.
Jody Sharma,
Yes.
Joy Siegel,
Yeah.
Wolfgang Tutoris,
Yes.
Amy Lawrence,
Yes.
Jessica Platt,
Yes.
Joseph Steinberg.
Yes. All right, now we've already dealt with the next matter, the Zoom matter. That matter has been adjourned. So we're now down to the last case of the evening. 1 Washington Avenue on the corner of Washington and Old Short Hills Road. Is there anyone here representing the applicant?
That's the applicant, Mr. Sanjay Rajan.
Hey, if you would just raise your hands, whoever going to testify. Do you swear from the testimony you give tonight in the Zoom hearing to be the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth? Yes. Your name and address for the record, spelling your names, please.
Sure, it's Sanjay Rajan, address is 1 Washington Avenue, Shore Hills, New Jersey. And should my wife testify as well, because I think she might make some comments.
She should be sworn as well.
Do you swear from the testimony about to give tonight be the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Your name for the record, spelling your name, please.
Tanya Chaturvedi Rajan.
You have to spell that.
Spell
I'm
it.
sorry.
Sorry, it's a long one. First name Tanya, Tanya. Last name Chaturvedi Rajan, Chaturvedi -Rajan, Rajan.
We'll proceed.
Okay, so yeah, good evening. Thank you for your time. I know this must be tough. It's a tough job to listen to all these cases. So we're looking to install a fence along our backyard. We are on a corner property, so that's why we're looking for a variance, because the fence we're looking to install is along Old Shore Hills Road. And since we're in a corner property, it's considered a front yard. Old Shore Hills Road is a busy road, and we didn't realize how busy it was until we actually moved here. We moved from Jersey City a year ago in September. We did realize a double yellow line, of course, but after moving, we realized, like, that in order to be safer, especially with 2 kids, we have a 7-year-old girl and a 5-year-old boy. We really want to get a fence installed so that it's much safer for them. And also, if like balls or anything goes into the road, it's probably not going to be safe for cars as well. And additional to that, we've also thought about putting plantings there as well, but we've spoken to some experts, and they've said that it's going to be hard to grow any plants there because we already have a lot of trees in that area. So it's the roots are very shallow as well. You have anything else? Yeah.
Questions from the board?
Actually.
Yes. Amy.
Have you considered, is this the only layout for the fence that you considered, or have you considered others? Because this, it seems like you could put the fence in a way where you're not, this has like 2 pieces coming across the front of it. Is this the only consideration you had, or why did you choose this configuration, perhaps, is a better question?
Sure. So where we put the fence right now, it's between 2 lines of trees that we have. So I guess we can share our screen. We can show how it looks. You have the...
That's what I was going to ask, actually. So.
Sorry, wrong screen. Are you able to see our screen?
Yes.
Yes.
And do you see a map?
Yes.
Yeah.
Photographs, right?
Can I interrupt here, please? So what we're looking at right now, has this been supplied to the board before this evening?
Oh, yeah, let's show the pictures actually. Tanya.
Yeah. I don't know if you can see that screen.
Wait.
Okay. Anyway, yeah. So I mean, so other options we've thought of.
Wait. Hold on. Has this image that you're showing the board and the public, has this been submitted to the board prior to this evening?
Not this picture with the highlighting yellow. So I think we could dismiss this one. The one we submitted.
No. Hold on, please. Let me finish. We don't have to dismiss it. We just need to mark it so that's part of the record.
Oh, okay.
So we're going to mark this as A1, and we're going to call it aerial of property and surrounding area. Okay. I'm just going to ask that you provide a copy of this at the end of the hearing, regardless of how it goes, to Eileen.
Okay, sounds good. That's fine.
Okay, you can proceed.
I have a question. You say that you want to put in an aluminum fence. Is that correct?
Yes, we thought aluminum would look better for the neighborhood. So that's why we thought that we'll put in aluminum.
What color?
Black.
What height?
Say it again.
Black color, aluminum fence.
How high?
6 feet.
Now, I drive past this location every day, numerous times, and although this part of the property where you want to put the fence is elevated somewhat from Old Short Hills Road, the trees that you have there are, I won't say they're sparse, but they're not evergreens.
Mhm.
I don't know what they would look like in the winter time, but they don't, right now, if you had a black fence up there, you could see it from the road, in my opinion.
Mhm.
So the question is, would you have any objection to getting a black aluminum estate fence and planting evergreens 4 feet above the root ball along the exterior of that fence as it faces the street?
Right, so we could have the black aluminum fence and in front of it, plant evergreen trees. Closer to the street.
Yes, evergreens in front of it.
Okay, yeah, so right now we have 2 rows of trees. We're planning to put the fence right behind the first row that's closer to Old Short Hills Road.
Those trees.
Okay,
And in between those trees are saying that we should plant some more evergreens to cover the fence. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Right, so we have 2 rows of trees, one close to Old Short Hills Road and one
Yes.
closer to the house. We're planning to put the fence in between those 2 rows of trees. And because the first row near the road is sparse, to your point, especially in the winter, you're suggesting that we plant evergreens in front of the fence.
That's correct.
Okay, yeah, I think.
Yeah, just one comment for your consideration. As my husband said earlier, we have consulted with a few landscape experts, and what they told us is that, as you can see in this image, the Norway
wait. If you're going to refer to any images or documents
Okay.
that are not in the record, because this one I don't believe is in the record at all, you need to identify it because we need to mark it as a separate exhibit. And that goes for any other photographs you want to introduce as part of the record.
So these photos, I had submitted a black and white copy of them.
I see 4 photos, black and white, in my packet, and I don't see this photograph.
Okay, so this one we can submit after with the previous image we showed.
Okay, so why don't we're going to mark this as A2, and please identify what this is that we're looking at, including who took the photo, the day it was taken, and what it shows.
Sure. So this is basically the 2 lines of trees I was talking about, where the right side is closer to Old Short Hills Road. My wife took this picture April 24th.
Yeah, April 24th. So this is
2021.
2021. Yep. So what I was saying, Mr. Steinberg, is that just for your consideration, landscapers have informed us that plantings will not do well in this location because of 2 reasons. One, that the Norway maple that we have inherited have very shallow roots, and 2, because they're very dense. There's very dense foliage in the summer, because of which there's very limited sun that the new plantings would be exposed to. This picture here was taken in, late April, so there is very limited coverage at this point. But if you were to drive past, earlier today, you'd see that this area is nearly all shaded. So I just wanted to let you know that we did consider the fence and the plantings, but I want to let you know that the plantings may not survive. And so that's why we were wondering if just given all of that information, if it was something that you felt strongly about.
have you considered moving the fence, the proposed fence further onto your property on the other side of that row of trees on the left, further away from Old Short Hills Road?
So if we did that, we would lose a good chunk of the property as well. So we would lose usage of everything you're looking in this photograph right now. So we did consider it. And then we also have some plantings right in this photograph. You can see that we would basically have to pull out all those plantings as well.
I had a question. So
Yes.
how dense is this 2 rows of trees that we are looking at? And how far away are they from each other? Roughly.
Roughly, this is 10, like they're probably 20 feet apart, approximately, from each other, the 2 lines. So we're planning to build a fence right between them. So 10 feet from the road. And yeah, in summer right now, I mean, not sure how to describe it, but yeah, there are leaves growing on them, and it does provide some coverage.
Can you go back to the aerial view that has the line draw of the fence?
Yes.
So the green line is the fence. How is the rest of your property is not fenced, will not be fenced in?
It is currently not fenced, but it will be fenced in along with this project, but we understand that we don't need a variance for the rest of the property.
So this is the part you need the variance for.
That's
So
right.
when you showed the other photograph and you said that the fence is in between, is it like exactly in between, like in the middle between the 2 rows of trees, or is it closer to the one along Old Hills Road?
It's closer, it will be closer to, so your question is,
Where would it go?
is the fence going to be placed equidistant between these 2?
Yes, that's
or would it be, so the fence would be placed closer to the trees on the right side of the road, setback
10 feet.
roughly 10 feet.
And back to the other drawing, back to the other photo, the fence aligns with the front of your house? That actually concerns me more for some reason.
Right. Well, that goes back to my first question that I don't think we addressed yet. The choice of putting the fence there, and had you considered some other alternative?
So the other alternative, one was putting it right up against the house, which basically would
Yeah, but
it would be right here, which basically would eliminate our usage of everything to the right of that.
Yeah, I think the question is, I'm sorry, Ms. Lawrence, is a question around the placement of the horizontal?
It is, yes.
Okay. So to be transparent, this is the only configuration we thought of. We're not married to this by any means. Our concern is more around the vertical portion. If you prefer a different configuration for the horizontal, we're open to it. We're open to anything that will make you more comfortable.
How long does that run down the Old Short Hills Road line? How long is that fence line?
This would be about 100 feet.
100 feet.
Yeah.
Have you considered 4 foot versus 6 foot?
We still feel like, I mean, 6 foot obviously provides more safety, but yeah, if it's 4 feet that we get, I mean, we'll take it as long as it provides. I mean, it's about ensuring our kid doesn't, especially our younger one, doesn't run into the road, right? So if a ball goes, obviously we've told him not to, but then we've seen him especially near the front, if the ball has gone on Washington Avenue before and he's run out there. So when he's playing in the backyard, we really want something that will probably ensure a ball doesn't go into the road, but then a 4 foot will probably stop him too, so he won't go. So.
Yeah, I think the 6 foot 6 feet would make us feel more comfortable. Just because of just how busy the street is, unfortunately. The little guy is a brat. He's still awake, by the way. He's right behind us. So we're just afraid that 4 feet may not provide as much safety.
And also if the ball does go into the road, it's unsafe for cars as well. So we want to avoid that.
And Craig, a 4-foot fence would not require a variance on Old Shore Hill
Yeah.
Road.
I know. That's why
I
I
know that we've had.
I
alluded
think-
to that.
Actually,
I
no,
think
in this portion,
I think for
yeah.
us, it still requires a variance.
But that's right,
We-
we're not county at that point.
That's right. That's on a county road. Yeah.
Right, well, not at that point, it starts.
Yeah, so actually right before us, so if you're going north, it's a county road.
Correct.
And we probably wouldn't be here, like, if we could just get a 4 feet fence. Yeah.
So yeah, to be,
Yes.
if you know, we had this discussion with Eileen actually.
Yeah, I
So
forgot.
the street becomes, or Old Short Hills becomes a county road at Park,
Yeah.
which is the next intersection up above Jefferson. So in this portion, you know, this is still a town road.
Right. And yeah, actually, when we bought the place, we thought we could put a 4 foot fence.
Yeah, that was the advice we were given by the agent and the law and the architect, but.
Eileen, just confirm this. If they put up a 4-foot fence, you say it would not be considered,
No, they still
Right.
need a variance. They would still need a variance. They're not on. this
they
isn't
would
county.
still need a variance.
Yes, I was mistaken.
Yeah, it'd still be in the front yard.
I thought it was
Well,
a
it's
county
not a
road.
county road. If it was a county road, they would be able to do a 4-foot,
Yeah.
but it's not county in this area.
Yeah, I saw the 527 and I assumed it was a county road.
If I could revisit the additional plantings for a second, and just to thoroughly exhaust that point. You know, if one were to, if you were to put up the fence and then you were to put evergreen plantings outside the tree line on the street side, is there room to do that? And is the soil there, would the soil, the condition of the soil permit that?
Pictures? Yeah.
Yeah, just give us a moment. We'll flip over to the pictures so you can see what the other side looks like.
I mean, we can, yeah, they'll tell us if they haven't got it before.
Okay.
So this is, not sure if we sent this one, but we can always mark it down as A2, I think.
A3.
A3.
I actually think we have this
Okay.
in the packet. Although it
and
appears
white.
that we have it, although we have a black and white version.
Okay, so
Why don't-
we'll submit this as well as A3.
Okay, why don't we mark this as A3? And what are we looking at here?
Sure. So this is the view from across the street of Old Shore Hills Road. So as you can see, this was taken in April 24th by my wife, and you can see the trees. We would put the fence behind those trees, and basically putting it in front would be right in front of those trees. So it's a very shallow area,
Right.
And then right in front of it the sidewalk.
Yeah, that's precisely what I was asking you. Is what is the practicality of doing that?
So I guess we answered it, or
Well, I don't think we have an answer. I think the
I see. So it does look, I mean, I'm not an expert at planting, but to me, it looks shallow, it's slopey, and there's a sidewalk, so it doesn't give us much room. I mean, if we plant it, I mean, we've been told that it's unlikely they would grow.
And the distance, you know, from the sidewalk to the first, you know, few trees is only a few feet, you know, so if we planted something right in between, you know, those trees, when they get larger, you know, they'll start spilling over into the sidewalk, as you can imagine. And this is, as you all know, like this is it's a pretty heavy traffic sidewalk. So I'm not sure if that would be optimal.
Eileen, is there an easement off this sidewalk?
Is there an easement off it? I would.
Because I mean, they're putting it 10 feet off the property line. Is that?
We can't, we wouldn't go by that. We really have to do it off the house. I mean, I don't usually tell them, give them a distance off the street because it varies.
Right. 'Cause it
they
looks
have
like some of it looks like per the the drawing almost looks like part of the sidewalk's on their property and part of it's not.
Yes, so part of the sidewalk that's on the property is near the front of the house. Oh, go back to A1. Okay, so yeah, this is a survey.
This is a survey, yeah, but so the portion that has the sidewalk on it is not being discussed here because it is in the front of the house.
Right now, I'm merely looking at it. There's an easement off Old Short Hills Road that you can't put a fence in. How far off the road is it? Because up in that front corner there, you're very close to the sidewalk.
I have two questions. Could you show me on this drawing where what you call the horizontal line is? Is it with the very front face of the house or the first setback or the second? Like, where is it? What is it aligning with?
Yeah, so this is, so it's not the very front of the house. It's aligning with, this is the end of the driveway.
Okay.
And it aligns with the end of the driveway.
And it's not, it doesn't follow the grid of the house. It follows the grid of Old Short Hills Road.
It follows, well, it's actually perpendicular to the house. So this is how it would go.
And then my other question is, when you spoke to the landscape professionals, did you only speak to them about like the planting of like trees, like evergreens? Did you discuss with them the possibility of lower like grasses or bushes? Because sometimes with the fences, I think like you seem in the trees that you have, the coverage problem isn't high, it's low.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
I feel that any type of low growth would be able to survive there.
So we spoke to them about ship laurels, which I think is the other like dense, very popular shrub that's used. I think their, feedback was just around anything being able to survive, shrub or tree. Shrubbery may have a high probability of surviving just because of the height and, the utilization of like sunlight and so on. But again, I mean, they did say that, it may be challenging for anything to really grow there, unfortunately. So where we're landing, where we're at right now is, it seems like, I think what we've asked for is, 10 feet off the side of the property, 6 feet height, and potentially no shrubbery, but just want to make sure that we're all sort of on the, because you had quite a bit of discussion around that. So, what is the board feeling right now? Like, what would make you comfortable?
Has this been opened up to the public for questions?
Yeah, that would be a good idea. Is there anyone in the audience who has any questions?
I can't. No, there's no one.
I would
I mean,
be
if it makes
opposed-
the, oh, sorry.
I would be opposed to any fence on the,
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, can we just, I'm sorry, and this is my bad, not just questions, but also any comments before the board deliberates.
is there anyone in the audience who has?
Could you stop sharing your screen, please?
A comment they would like to make?
No, there are none.
Well, I'll close the public portion of the hearing so that we can discuss the matter among the board members.
Mr. Steinberg, just one comment before.
Yes, so I mean, if it really like, if we can try putting the shrubbery, if that really helps the board feel comfortable with the fence, we will, like, even though like we've been told that it won't grow, we're willing to put the shrubbery in order to get the fence. And see what, like, I mean, we'll plant them, and then if they don't grow, like they don't grow, it's fine. But we'll try it. If that makes the board feel more comfortable.
What about a 4-foot fence?
Yeah, we should be fine with that, right?
Okay.
Forfeit, yeah. I mean, yeah, if the option is no fence versus forfeit, we'll go with forfeit, yes.
Yeah. All right, we'll close the public portion of the hearing and we'll discuss the matter among the board members. I'll go first. I would be in favor of a 4-foot fence in the location that has been described by the applicant between those two lines of trees. There is some embankment that comes up from the sidewalk and the roadway. And I think a 4-foot tree, 4-foot fence, black 4-foot fence set back in between those two lines of trees probably would not be visible from Old Short Hills Road. Not without taking your eyes off the road and looking for the fence, which would mean you'd end up needing a fast way to get to St. Barnabas Hospital, that is. Anyway, I'd be curious to know what the rest of you think.
I feel safety is paramount. We know how busy that road is. And given the traffic and given that it's a very busy intersection, which actually crosses, if I'm not mistaken, straight into Glen Avenue, it's not just traffic going into the Main Street side towards the market, but also towards the Millburn station. I would be, supportive of the fence here. And whether it's 4 or 6, it's really, whatever is, everybody's comfortable with collectively. But certainly, that is a must. About the shrubbery, I was, on the fence because there's already kind of trees out there, 2 lines of trees. I didn't get a sense from the pictures of how far apart they were from the trees from each other. But if that becomes dense in any case and gives a protection, do we really need shrubbery? I mean, and given that, the applicants have already done their due diligence in terms of whether it would, grow or not, and then again, live with that. So that was my take.
And how do you feel about the height of the fence?
Look, I feel that 4 feet they would have got anyways, given that this is close to a county road. Again, technically we are saying county road, if I heard correctly, is 2 blocks away north of this location. Traffic is the same. I mean, it's crossing their home, it's crossing park, it's the same. So from practical purposes, 4 feet would have given them the benefit anyway of a county road. If 6 makes them more comfortable, I wouldn't be opposed to that. But I would look to hear from everyone here.
I would be okay with 6, and I understand because of children. And, it's a really tough intersection because it's also used a lot now when they close off Main Street, like to stop and then cut into Glen. And I do think there should be some attempt for planting. I don't know what would grow, but I'm sure I know there are plants that grow in shade. But the part that I would like to see changed is where it meets the front of the house. I think it should go not by the driveway for 2 reasons. One, I think that part of the fence will be most visible. And then it also, by pushing it back, to the next corner of the house, it would also just decrease the entire length, which was something that was brought up earlier, I think by Craig, that is a little bit concerning, of like 100 feet. So it's not the height so much for me as it is the length.
So I'm kind of a hybrid of what Joe said and what Joy said. I think that I would like to see it start back at the farthest edge of the house, not in the front, because I think putting a fence along Washington Avenue is a little bit much. I would definitely want to see it at 4 feet. And like I said, 100-foot fence down Old Short Hills Road is going to look, I mean, it's going to be huge. I would like to see that brought way back. So like moving it back towards the back corner of the house would be, I think, more appropriate. And regardless, like I said, there's screening that grows in shade, and I would definitely want to see screening on this fence. I just don't want to see a black fence going through that property. I mean, buying a house on a corner, on a busy corner, that's part of the deal. You know, you buy a busy house on the corner, you got to deal with a traffic pattern. So, you know, that's something that's unfortunate, but I think we also have to be somewhat mindful of the fact that there hasn't been a fence there before. And now if you're gonna put this large fence up, it's gonna be very noticeable. So 4 feet from the back corner is where I would go.
You're talking about putting the fence, when you say the next corner of the house, where it says 52.2 feet on our map,
No, I'm talking about the back corner,
all the way back.
all the way back, past the chimney, in that back corner, starting it from there and running it back.
I think that would be the best option.
So it's off the street. You certainly could screen it very well there because it's away from those trees.
You would take it from that corner to the rear property line.
Straight back. Yep. This way we don't have to deal with any fence on Washington. They still have a very significant yard. And I mean, this is an acre of property, remind you. This is not a small lot.
Yeah.
So, you know, why you'd want, if it's about safety, why you'd want the kids even out that far towards the road is something to consider altogether. So this way it would be back, you know, you would have more safety, keeping them further away from the street rather than 10 feet off the road, or essentially 10 feet off the road. And then it would be out of that tree line and it could be properly screened.
And you think at that point, you don't need additional screening?
You could, yeah, I would still screen it. But at that point, you would be out of the tree line.
Oh,
so you could put evergreens there and they would grow.
So now I'm a hybrid of your hybrid. I agree with the back corner of the property line, but I instead of running the fence straight back and creating rows of tree, because the fence will still need to be screened. You know, you're going to create 2 rows of trees and then another row of trees.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Yeah.
Right. Like, to me, it makes more sense, honestly, to just move the fence to if we're going to, into the inside of the double rows of trees, whatever that is. And if additional screening is needed there, it can be done because there's sunlight, and then it's sort of more coherent than running sort of rows of plantings down the backyard. But
I actually, I'm surprised that I'm saying this, but I actually am not bothered by the fence in the current location where it comes out at the start of the driveway. I mean, besides used to having lived down the street years ago and being very familiar, because I also lived in a house that was on the corner of Old Short Hills Road. I spent a while at the property today. And I think the house is set pretty far back from Washington Avenue. I would completely agree with what my fellow board members are saying if the house was set closer to Washington, but it really is set pretty far back. I mean, that's a long driveway there. So it actually doesn't bother me in the current location. I agree that I would like to see some attempt at screening, you know, whether or not it lasts or, you know, that or only survives in certain areas. But I also think that Short Hills Road, I mean, come on, we all live in this town. I mean, people treat it like a highway these days. I mean, people are speeding on it. It's dangerous. It gets backed up terribly at certain hours where it's like a parking lot. And I just think it's a safety issue. It's a safety issue for the family. It's a safety issue for the cars that are driving down the street, you know, in terms of, you know, the possibility of, you know, balls rolling out onto the street and stuff like that. And I think that cars drive so fast, frankly, down that road. And even if you're stuck in traffic, it's so busy and you're trying to, concentrate on, not hitting the cars in front of you, that I just don't think that the fence is going to be so noticeable from Old Short Hills Road. So, again, I'm surprised that I'm saying this, but I'm fine with the current placement of it.
So would you go for a 4 foot or a 6 foot or no preference?
I don't think that in this case that the additional 2 feet is going to make a huge deal. So I really, I'm fine either way. I mean, if fellow board members felt more comfortable with it being 4 feet instead of 6 feet, I think it could still, I guess, serve the same purpose, in terms of, keeping it safe. But again, I'm in favor of keeping it in the current location with an attempt at screening.
And I would just reiterate just the attempted screening concept that's been brought up several times. And also, when you go up and down Old Short Hills Road, both north and south, I mean, the fences that are already in existence, it's a real hodgepodge of some that look okay, some that really don't look okay. And I think the overriding concern being safety, and the second being whatever is done should be as tasteful as it can be done, and with the screening, to that end. In terms of 4 or 6, I guess I would prefer 4, but I don't know. It's.
So I'll just say I'm okay with the location, provided I think I would prefer 4 foot and screening, but I as Joy said, and someone I don't, but the front, the location of the fence along Washington Avenue, I would want that pushed back. It's just more fence across the, it's creating 2 sort of front fences, and it's a very large one across there. But other than that, I'm okay.
Yeah, I would concur with most of the board members have already said, 4 feet in height, reduced length, and coverage. That would be ideal.
What if that Washington Avenue portion were pushed back, not all the way to the back corner, but to that first, the corner, that first corner section?
The 52-2 mark?
Yeah, thank you. Yes.
I'm good with that.
Like I was saying, kind of take that whole backwards L and shorten
Yeah, I
it.
could live with that too.
Same here.
That way, further off of Washington, and it's less obtrusive.
What do we think about screening? Yes or no?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, for screening.
I think you gotta have, yeah.
All right. You ready,
Let
Joe?
me see if I can broker something here. How about a fence 4 feet in height from that corner of the building where it says 52.8 feet or 52.2 feet? It shows you, I should use my, yes, 52.2. And over to the middle of those 2 lines of trees that are already there. And the applicant has already said that he'll try the screening. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. So how do
4
I?
feet, right?
Yeah. Do I have a 52.2 foot line over to where the applicant has proposed between the 2 lines of trees going to the back property line with 4 foot height and screening, attempted screening to see if it works?
So moved.
Yes.
Is there a motion? Is there
So
a
moved.
motion on my deal?
Yeah, I'll move it.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Rick Plantner,
Yes.
Judy Sharma,
Yes.
Joy Siegel,
Yes.
Bruce,
Yes.
Amy Lawrence,
Yes.
Jessica Blatt,
Yes.
Joseph Steinberg.
Yes. Wow, I brokered a deal there. Okay, that brings us to the end of the agenda, believe it or not. And what time is it?
30.
10:26. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I move adjournment.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Show of hands.
Aye.
Right, you guys be safe, and I'll see you in July. On the 16th, is it, Eileen?
19.
19th.
All right, thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Right.
Thank you.
Good night, all.